Chapter 940. Tang Jing immediately shifted his attention to mind manipulation. Mind manipulation focused on mental attacks, which was the same as the demonic sound of the bell, but had many differences. Mind manipulation didn't require the help of an external medium. With a very short incantation and the corresponding mental cultivation method, everything would flow naturally. With a single thought, everything about mind manipulation was deeply imprinted in his mind, and the speed of learning was no less than that of heaven's splitting kick. Tang Jing had never practiced a mental attack technique, which was very rare in this world. Even the Empyrean Fairy and Tian Chanzi didn't know how to use it. Therefore, compared to heaven's splitting kick, he was more interested in the inner demon's mind manipulation. Seeing that Xianyin and the High Lord were very close to the treetops at the bottom of the cliff, Tang Jing grabbed the shooting sun arrows that were colliding with the copper-yellow light and chased after them. At this time, Tian Chanzi also caught up and said indignantly, "This woman is really powerful. She even used a mental attack technique. I almost fell into her trap." Mental attacks hurt people invisibly. Even if it couldn't kill the opponent, it was enough to make the opponent fall into an illusion. It was more difficult to guard against than other physical attacks. "I'll deal with her," Tang Jing volunteered. Heaven Monk looked at him in disbelief and said, "Can you do it?" "TCH. How can a man say no?" Tang Jing smiled evilly and directly chased after the two. Tian Chanzi looked at him deeply and muttered, "This kid always surprises me. Don't you know that this is a scare? I can't do anything, but you are so confident. Isn't this a blow to me?" Tian Chanzi wanted to cry but had no tears. However, he didn't stand by and watch. Whether Tang Jing was bragging or not, at least he would join the battle. Whoosh! The air was pierced with a sharp sound. Xianyin's heart trembled. She looked up and saw 3 shooting sun arrows flying at her at high speed. Xianyin felt bad. She had consumed a lot of energy. At first, she didn't take the shooting sun arrows seriously. However, the simple exchange just now gave him a new understanding of the power of the shooting sun arrows. The shooting sun arrows were definitely not as simple as she thought. This time, the 3 arrows were fired simultaneously, and the power was even greater. She threw the Great Lord down and said, "You go first, I'll catch up later." The High Lord's speed suddenly increased, and then he steadily landed on the treetops. Without any hesitation, he jumped into the dense forest and disappeared without a trace. "Damn it, the High Lord actually escaped!" Tang Jing cried out in alarm, but he was too far away. He could only watch as the Great Lord disappeared into the woods. Since the High Lord was nowhere to be seen, all the more reason he couldn't let Xianyin go. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to gain much from this trip. His gaze locked onto Xianyin as he leaped towards her. Xianyin took out her little bell, causing it to fly up and float above her head, emitting a bronze-yellow light. 3 copper-yellow rays of light shot out from the bell, and met the 3 shooting sun arrows head-on. A dazzling light burst out in midair. The attack of the shooting sun arrows was neutralized, and the light also disappeared. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Tang Jing casually put away the shooting sun arrows that were at the end of their flight into his bag, and then stomped down. Step on the mountain. This was one of the moves of the heaven-splitting leg technique. In that instant, Tang Jing's entire center of gravity sank, and his legs glowed with a golden luster. This was the effect of the chaotic Vajra spell. He suddenly descended. His feet seemed to possess boundless power, enough to crush mountains. Moreover, the momentum of his descent was very compatible with this move, making it even more powerful. Bang! Xianyin did not dodge. Instead, she relied on her slender hands to meet the enemy. She raised her hand above her head, and Tang Jing's foot just happened to land on her palm. Time and space seemed to have been frozen. In their eyes, there was only each other, and sparks seemed to be flying. Under that attack, a shockwave spread out in all directions from the point where the hands and feet collided. Tang Jing's momentum was stopped, but he did not stop his attack. Instead, he used the Heavenly Blade Revolution. Whiz! With a sweep of his long leg, it was like a long spear sweeping towards Xianyin's head. A cold light flashed in Xianyin's eyes. She naturally saw the power of this leg technique and reprimanded. "What kind of leg technique is this?" "Heaven-splitting leg," Tang Jing said indifferently as he increased the strength of his leg to the limit. Xianyin immediately raised her hands to block, grabbing onto one of Tang Jing's legs, but the huge force caused her to take a step back. "Heaven-splitting leg? That's quite a big name," Xianyin said sternly. Using all the strength in his hands, Tang Jing's leg that was being grabbed was about to break. Tang Jing immediately activated the chaotic Vajra spell, and immediately, a golden luster appeared on his legs. Xianyin suddenly used all her strength, but she was still unable to injure her muscles and bones. She exclaimed in surprise, as if she was surprised by the strength of Tang Deng's defense. Tang Jing still had some lingering fear, but he would not give her a second chance to use her strength. Although he was very confident in his chaotic Vajra spell, his opponent was an expert of the semi-god realm after all, so he did not dare to take the risk. Thus, with a move that could sweep away 1,000 armies, Tang Zheng's other leg swept towards Xianyin's neck. A gust of wind blew over, and she felt a chill on her neck, causing her expression to change slightly. This set of leg techniques seemed simple, but in reality, it had anticipated many situations in actual combat. It seemed ordinary, but in reality, it was ever-changing. There was a saying that no matter how many changes there were, it was still the same. This set of leg techniques was a typical example of this. The simple leg technique included many combinations and changes. A series of attacks made people unable to defend against it. Tang Jing also gradually understood this point, and couldn't help but look at Qiyu in a new light. As expected of the leg technique created by Qiyu, there were many places where Qiyu's shadow could be seen. This set of leg techniques was particular about being fierce and domineering. It was of the same origin as Qiyu, and it was also suitable for Tang Jing's style. Under the sweeping of 1,000 armies, Xianyin had no choice but to let go of Tang Jing and subconsciously retreat. Tang Jing escaped, but he did not retreat. His body leaned back, and with a forward somersault, he struck down with one leg towards Xianyin. Divine Dragon Tail Swing. At this moment, his leg was like the tail of a divine dragon, fiercely swinging down with a heart-palpitating power. At the same time, the dragon chi and dragon might in his body automatically mobilized. Pow! The air exploded like a firecracker. The power of this kick was even greater than Tang Jing had expected. Tang Jing, the dragon god technique you cultivate is actually very compatible with this divine dragon tail swing, so it automatically mobilized your dragon chi and dragon might. The inner demons was surprised. Qiyu said proudly. Now you know how powerful I am. The cultivation technique I created is definitely not a small matter. The inner demons snorted, but did not refute. From his point of view, Qiyu did not seem to be bragging. Tang Jing was secretly delighted. He silently circulated the dragon god technique. The power of this move was not yet exhausted, and it was even more powerful. Xianyin narrowed her eyes slightly. If she was at her peak, she would not be afraid of these leg techniques. But now that she was seriously injured, it would not be so easy. Moreover, her opponent did not necessarily want to kill her. He only wanted to capture her. Moreover, as long as he could stall for time and wait for the Empyrean fairy to recover, she would have nowhere to run. In fact, Tang Jing understood this, so he did not want to kill her. That was a fool's dream. Xianyin gritted her teeth. She had never thought that she would encounter such a defeat. She was forced into such a sorry state by a first-grade Yuanyi. Moreover, this set of leg techniques was very strange and powerful. It was not something that someone of his cultivation level should possess. She did not have time to think about it. She hurriedly circulated her energy, causing the bell to emit thousands of rays of light. The sound of the bell became even louder. The demonic sound entered his ears, and there was no sound anywhere else. It was completely poured into Tang Deng's ears. Xianyin had already realized that Tang Deng's mind was firm. Ordinary spiritual attacks would not be effective. Therefore, she accumulated all the demonic sound in order to give him a fatal blow. If it was before, even if Tang Jing did not have the inner demons, he would still be greatly affected. But now that Tang Jing had learned the mind manipulation technique, he was able to comprehend spiritual attacks by analogy. As soon as the demonic sound entered his ears, he immediately activated the mind manipulation technique. Since the mind manipulation technique could take the hearts of others, it could naturally avoid such attacks. The inner demons were great at spiritual attacks. Compared to them, Xianyin was still 10 streets away. Even if the inner demons revealed a little bit of their techniques, it was absolutely not to be underestimated. Xianyin was originally waiting for Tang Jing to lose his mind so that she could quickly escape into the woods and disappear. But she saw the corner of Tang Jing's mouth curl up into a faint smile. Her heart trembled. She cried out in alarm. Bang! The divine dragon swings its tail directly shattered the light on the bell. With a cracking sound, another crack appeared on the bell. Ah! Xianyin was shocked. The bell was a sacred tool. Its power had been greatly reduced because of the previous crack. This time, a part of it was actually destroyed by the divine dragon swings its tail, forcibly creating a crack. Tang Jing also did not expect this. The power of the divine dragon swings its tail was much greater than the original because of the effect of the divine dragon arts. Seeing Xianyin turn pale with fright, Tang Jing moved his lips and chanted an incantation. At the same time, he activated the mind manipulation technique. An invisible force enveloped Xianyin. After all, she was an expert in spiritual attacks. She immediately reacted, her eyes releasing a terrifying light. You also know how to use spiritual attacks? Xianyin's voice became sharp. Previously, she only felt that Tang Jing was a little extraordinary. But now, she knew that he was the most troublesome person she had ever met. There were very few people in the world who were good at using spiritual attacks. She was only able to cultivate spiritual attacks because of a chance encounter. It was precisely because of this that she was chosen to come to this world with a mission. Spiritual attacks were not only used to attack others, but more importantly, they could also affect others. This was a realm that many other physical attack experts could not reach. When she arrived in a new world and faced an unfamiliar environment, the spiritual attack technique was very useful. Moreover, she also shouldered an even more important mission. Influencing others would be twice the result with half the effort. New Era was influenced by her, and then attacked the center of Huaxia from the wilderness outside the pass. In the end, she expelled the cultivators and completed her mission. Furthermore, New Era established a new dynasty. If not for her appearance or bewitchment, none of this would have happened. This world would have entered a new world. Therefore, she was the one who affected this world. Facing the attack of the mind manipulation technique, Xianyin's mind almost lost control. Although her cultivation was high, in terms of spiritual attacks, she was far from being as high as her own cultivation. Chapter 941. Xianyin hurriedly activated the bell and enveloped herself in light in an attempt to defend herself against the mind control technique. However, she still failed. She felt as if her mind was in a trance, and she was about to lose control. She was very clear about the serious consequences of losing control. It was very likely that Tang Jing would control her mind, and she would become a puppet. This was something that she had done to others before. She did not want it to happen to her even in her dreams. Tang Jing did not expect the mind control technique to succeed and control her. Thus, he took advantage of the moment when she was distracted to raise his leg. Heaven-splitting earth. This was the most powerful technique in the heaven-splitting leg technique. In an instant, the aura of heaven and earth was stirred up by this attack. Tang Jing's leg seemed to possess such great power. It broke through the air and rapidly descended. Pung! With a loud bang, Tang Jing's leg struck the bronze-yellow light. With a crack, the light shattered. However, this attack did not use up all of its strength and still landed on Xianyin's shoulder. Pooh! She spat out a mouthful of blood. Her mind became more and more dispirited and unstable. Tang Jing's will was like a sword and was about to drill into Xian Yin's mind. Xian Yin's heart trembled. However, she knew that at this critical moment, even if her cultivation level was much higher than Tang Jing's, if she could not resist, she would become a puppet and would never be able to rise again. She unwillingly widened her eyes and stared at Tang Jing, not bothering to hide the raging anger in her eyes. Tang Jing was delighted. He knew that he was about to succeed. This mind control technique was indeed powerful. Of course, if not for the heaven-splitting leg technique, he would not have succeeded so quickly. This set of leg techniques was not inferior to the Flying Immortal's sword technique in close combat. There was no need to rely on magical weapons. It was all based on one's own strength. It had indeed benefited Tang Jing a lot. Suddenly his pupils shrank. He looked at Xian Yin in disbelief. This was because a mist rose from Xian Yin's body and enveloped her whole body. Tang Jing found that his consciousness could not penetrate the mist, and the mind control technique had lost its effect. He roared angrily. Was he going to fail at the last minute and let her escape this calamity? He was not willing to give up just like that. Another leg flew up, and a divine dragon swings its tail attack was launched. Bang! A huge repulsive force bounced back from the fog. His leg did not penetrate the fog, and the repulsive force made his leg bones ache. He immediately realized that something was wrong, but it was too late, because the fog quickly condensed and turned into a crystal. She was sealed by the crystal again. Looking at this scene, Tang Jing was shocked speechless. Except for Tian Chanzi and him, the others had not seen Xian Yin's previous situation, but seeing this change, they were also shocked. Tang Jing's shock was even more intense, because he knew that Xian Yin had been hiding in the crystal at first, but he didn't expect that she could actually control it as she pleased. Not only did she allow him to escape from the crystal, she could also seal him inside again. Tang Jing's mind control technique could not penetrate the crystal to attack her, and the energy contained in the crystal was so strong that even a physical attack could not hurt her. Tang Jing was not willing to give up, and with a flying knife, he kicked the crystal. The crystal fell down quickly, but it was not damaged at all. Tang Jing sighed and quickly caught up with the crystal. Holding it in his hand, the crystal gradually turned from transparent to blurry. Xian Yin's eyes were filled with unwillingness and anger as she stared at him, leaving a deep impression in his mind. At this moment, Tian Chanzi came out of the forest. Just now, he saw that Tang Jing had completely taken the initiative, so he directly rushed into the forest to chase after the High Lord. However, the forest was too dense, and this was an unfamiliar environment, so he did not chase after the High Lord and returned empty-handed. He glanced at the crystal in Tang Jing's hand and said in surprise, "What's going on? Where's Xian Yin?" Tang Jing pointed at the crystal and said, "She's in there. She sealed herself in there, and we have no way to break it." Tian Chanzi still remembered the strength of the crystal and waved his fist in annoyance. "This woman is really cunning." Previously, when he was being chased by Xian Yin in the cave, he was in a very sorry state, which made him suffer a lot. When he saw that Tang Jing had the upper hand, he thought that he could capture the other party, but he did not expect that she actually had a trick up her sleeve. Now, no one could do anything to her, so they could only stare at the crystal helplessly. Tian Chanzi looked deeply at Tang Jing and said, "How did you do all this?" Tang Jing laughed. "A hermit has his own clever plan." Then, he jumped and flew back to the top of the cliff. The others had been watching them without blinking, so they had clearly seen the battle between Tang Jing and Xian Yin. They had also seen Xian Yin's strange methods, so they all had complicated expressions. This was especially true for the Empyrean Fairy, who frowned because she had never seen such a situation before. "Is there no way to get her out?" the Empyrean Fairy asked curiously. Tang Jing spread his hands. "I don't have a way, but you can try." "Okay, then I'll try." The Empyrean Fairy clenched her fist and threw a punch at the crystal. Boom! A muffled sound rang out. Fortunately, Tang Jing had firmly held onto the crystal, otherwise it would have been sent flying. The crystal was still intact. The Empyrean fairy's expression dimmed. She was very clear on the strength of her punch. Since it did not cause any damage to the crystal, it was enough to show how powerful it was. Wu Junshan asked with a complicated expression. Then is there really no way? He was a martial artist, so he could not think of a better plan, but he could not help but frown when he saw that everyone was in trouble. It's not that there is no way, but it will take a lot of time. It's not something that can be done in a short period of time. Tang Zheng muttered. It's good that there is a way. What is it? Lan Yu was delighted to hear this and asked. Tang Zheng looked at the couple and said, This crystal is a body of energy. As long as we absorb all of its energy, Xianyin will naturally be able to see the light of day again. Then, we will have a chance to deal with her. The Empyrean fairy and Tian Chanzi did not object, because this was the best way. However, the most important point was that Xianyin could take the initiative to melt the crystal and escape. If she brought it back to the island like the previous crystal, then it would be a disaster. Once she escaped, the people on the island would become living targets. No one would be her opponent. Tang Jing had an idea and suggested, Why don't I put her into Summer Heavens? That way, she won't be able to escape from me. Summer Heavens was Tang Jing's territory. He had the final say. Anyone who entered it would not be able to escape. In addition, he could absorb the crystal's energy at any time and place. Over time, his cultivation would increase greatly. Even if she escaped in the future, he would not have to worry. The Empyrean fairy guessed Tang Zheng's thoughts and nodded in agreement after thinking for a while. This method is feasible, but you must remember that she is very important. She is related to the conspiracy of the realm beyond heaven. Understood. This is the most important thing. Tang Jing nodded in agreement. The purpose of the other world was definitely not simple. If they did not figure it out, it would be a hidden danger. As for what happened to the cultivators who were expelled, it was also very important to know what happened to them. It was a pity that they did not have anyone from the realm beyond heaven by their side. The demons who returned from the realm beyond heaven had all died in a series of battles. No one could answer this question. Sigh, I should have captured a few demons who returned from the realm beyond heaven. That way, I would have been able to find out what the realm beyond heaven is all about. Tang Jing sighed regretfully. There is no medicine for regret in this world. Besides, time will give us the answer. The Empyrean fairy did not mind. Tang Jing smiled. At this moment, Qi Yu and the inner demons were locked in a fierce argument. Both of them wanted to take the credit for themselves. They both said that it was because of him that they were able to capture Xianyin. They were in a deadlock. Tang Jing, you be the judge, Qi Yu said angrily. The inner demons also said, That's right, young man. You be the judge. Was it because of my mind manipulation that Xianyin had no choice but to give up and seal herself in the end? It was clearly my heaven-splitter-leg's continuous attacks that exhausted her. Even without your mind-absorbing technique, Tang Jing could have easily captured her. Who needs your help? Qi Yu retorted. Tang Jing helplessly shouted in his mind. Stop! This time, both of you contributed. It was because of both of you that I was able to capture Xianyin. Young man, you can't say that. There is always a question of how much credit one has contributed. Who do you think contributed the most? The inner demons did not give up and asked. Qi Yu also said, That's right. Who contributed the most? Say it so that some people will understand their own abilities. Tang Jing suddenly had an idea. There was no doubt that this time he had gained a big advantage. If it wasn't for Xianyin, these two would not have been able to use Qi to teach him the heaven-splitting kick and mind manipulation. They must have many other skills or things that would be useful to Tang Jing. If they were fair and there was no competition between the two, it would not be a good thing for him. This time he had tasted the sweetness of competition and felt that it was necessary to drive a wedge between the two. If they continued to fight, he might be able to take advantage of them next time. He gradually had a plan in his mind. After thinking for a while, he said, The heaven-splitting kick was very useful. After all, With my cultivation, I was able to suppress Xianyin. This is already incredible. Hearing this, Qiyu laughed and said with satisfaction, Inner demons, are you convinced now? My heaven-splitting kick is even more powerful. The inner demons snorted unhappily. But Tang Jing did not finish his words and continued to add, But at the last moment, the mind manipulation played the most important role. If it wasn't for the mind manipulation, with the influence of the other party's demonic bell sound, I would not have been able to gain any advantage. It would have been impossible to force her to seal herself. So in the end, the mind manipulation was more important and more effective. Chapter 942. Qiyu was stunned. He did not expect this to be the result. This was too much of a bully. He was indignant. Tang Jing, why is this the result? Tang Jing had already anticipated his reaction and calmly said, I am just speaking the truth. Qiyu was furious, but he could not refute. After all, his heart was still in Tang Deng's hands. He angrily snorted and said, Inner demons, don't be so proud. The inner demons laughed. I am proud, what can you do to me? Changing the topic, he said to Tang Jing, Young man, what you said is the truth, haha, I find that I actually like you a little. Don't! Tang Jing refused. I am not glass. What is glass? The inner demons were confused. Qiyu disdainfully said, You don't even know this, what a country bumpkin. Do you understand the benefits of being gay? Disgusting! The inner demons was furious. Tang Jing was too lazy to pay attention to the two's argument, and directly put the crystal into Sumeru world. With a thought, the crystal's energy was continuously absorbed into his body from Sumeru world. This was just like absorbing air. He could absorb the energy of the crystals at any time and place, but he could not absorb too much at once. In other words, one could not become fat in one bite. He enjoyed this process very much. As for Sumeru world, the crystal became transparent, and Xian Yin's eyes were wide open, but there was nothing she could do. Tang Jing subconsciously looked down the cliff and asked, Can you really not find the High Lord's whereabouts? Tian Chanzi shook his head. This person is very cunning. When I chased after him, I already lost track of him. Tang Jing was helpless. All right, although it is a bit regretful, but this time the Azure Dragon Hall suffered a heavy blow, and also captured Xianyin, so this trip was not in vain. Marshall suddenly interjected. The Azure Dragon Hall's people are already mostly dead, and this is only a heavy blow? Tang Jing guessed what she was thinking and nodded. The Azure Dragon Hall's strength is not limited to this. We were too optimistic. Although we've gotten rid of Elder Angler and some flying guillotines, their true power hasn't been uprooted yet. Furthermore, the High Lord hasn't been caught yet, so he still has a chance to make a comeback. Wu Junshan and Lan Yu secretly nodded. They agreed with Tang Deng's point of view. They had been in the martial organization for most of their lives, so they could clearly deduce the general strength of the Azure Dragon Palace. The strength of the Azure Dragon Palace was definitely not limited to this. Otherwise, how could it lead the martial organization, the Li Palace, and the Sword Pavilion? Moreover, they had only killed a few flying guillotines this time. The remnants of the Li Palace, the Sword Pavilion, and the martial sect had not appeared, so the strength of these people could not be underestimated. I already know the whereabouts of Li Palace and Sword Pavilion. Tang Jing glanced at Li Xiaotian, who had not said a word since the beginning. This information was dug out from her mind. Since the High Lord has escaped, then let's make a trip to these two places, Tang Jing said. Wu Junshan and Lan Yu's eyes lit up as they cheerfully applauded. They were relatively familiar with the Li Palace, but they were very curious about the Sword Pavilion. This was because the Sword God was powerful and his actions were secretive, so the martial organization did not have much contact with him. The others naturally did not have any objections and walked down the mountain. Seeing Li Xiaotian remain silent, Tang Jing asked with concern, Are you all right? Li Xiaotian took a deep breath and raised her head. She squeezed out a smile, but it was very bitter. I'm fine. Tang Jing nodded and said, Don't think about the past. Put your thoughts on the future. People can't choose the past, but they can choose the future. Li Shutian's eyes lit up and she nodded. I understand. Thank you. Tang Jing did not try to persuade her any further. The group quickly descended the mountain and headed towards their next destination. The sword pavilion was located on a dangerous peak. The precipitous cliffs were like a sword piercing the heavens. The sword pavilion had a total of 300 sword slaves, and the core of the sword pavilion was the sword hut. It was said that the sword god had comprehended sword techniques in the sword furnace and finally reached great success. The sword pavilion was rarely visited by people. The highest peak in a chain of undulating mountain peaks was called the Divine Sword Peak. The steep and bumpy mountain forest seemed to have become flat ground under their feet. They were many times faster than ordinary people. They were unimpeded and arrived at the undulating mountain peaks outside the sword pavilion. Suddenly, the Empyrean fairy raised her hand and everyone subconsciously stopped. There's an ambush, the Empyrean fairy said in a deep voice. Tang Dang's pupils constricted. The sword slaves of the sword pavilion should not be so close to the outside. They should be closer to the inside. However, the Empyrean fairy would never make a mistake, so he warned. Everyone, be careful. Li Xiaotian, stay behind me. I will protect you. Li Xiaotian had powerful martial arts, but she didn't know how to use them. Therefore, Tang Jing had no choice but to protect her. After this journey, Li Xiaotian's mood had stabilized, and he obediently followed behind Tang Jing. Go! They took a few steps forward. Suddenly, whoosh! Whoosh! Streaks of sword light seemed to emerge from the ground as they strangled the group of people. The Empyrean fairy was walking at the front, but she was indifferent. These sword lights could not hurt her at all. Just as they were about to get close to her, an invisible force vibrated from her body, and the sword lights shattered. At the same time, Tian Chanzi also acted. The long sword in his hand trembled, and sword lights scattered all over the sky, accurately intercepting those sword lights. In an instant, all of the attacks collapsed, as if they had never appeared. This scene shocked the sword slaves hiding in the dark, and their breathing involuntarily quickened. Tian Chanzi's gaze turned, and he immediately locked onto the position of the sword slaves, and lightly slashed out with his sword. The sword chi was like a rainbow. The sword slaves were stunned. They had only seen this kind of powerful sword technique from their master, the sword god. Who were these people, and why were they so powerful? But there was no time to think, and they subconsciously raised their swords to block. Crack! The long sword broke. They could only watch as the sword chi entered their foreheads. A line of blood bloomed, and their vitality was cut off as they fell to the ground, dead. Tang Jing knit his brows as he looked at the sword slaves, and doubtfully said, The sword slaves shouldn't be placed in such an outer area. They seem to have expanded the defensive circle. He had learned from Li Xiaotian's brain that the sword pavilion's defensive formation was very different from what he saw now. It seems like Song Yu did something, and changed the sword pavilion's defensive formation. Martial's anger towards Song Yu had never decreased. Back then in the Imperial City, everyone had almost died in the explosion that he had detonated. This enmity was deep in his bones, and he would never forget it. Thus, Martial angrily said, He definitely knows that we are not dead, so he is guarding against our revenge. Tang Jing laughed in disdain. So what if he is guarding against it? These defenses will not change the outcome. Tian Chanzi urged. Then let's hurry up and destroy the sword pavilion, then we can go to the Li Palace. The few of them continued forward, and not long after they met the second group of sword slaves. However, this time, the number of sword slaves and their resistance were clearly stronger. It was precisely because of this that they believed that their actions had been exposed, so they immediately rushed towards the steep Divine Sword Peak as fast as lightning. The few of them quickly cut through the chaos, and without any obstruction, they arrived at the foot of the Divine Sword Peak. Everyone soared into the air, and with the tip of their feet on the cliff, they did not take the normal path, and directly rushed towards the top of the Divine Sword Peak. Tang Jing held onto Li Xiaotian's hand. She was extremely nervous, and her palms were covered in sweat. Whiz! A sword flew over from the top of the mountain, and directly shot towards Tang Jing. With a thought, there was no need for him to make a move. The War Soul's sword appeared out of thin air, and welcomed the sword. Clang! A spark flickered, and the sword broke into two, but the War Soul's sword was still intact. Everyone had already flown halfway up the mountain, and were about to reach the top of the Divine Sword Peak. Suddenly, the sound of something tearing through the air rang out, and 36 sword beams flew over from the top of the mountain, surrounding everyone. This is a sword formation, everyone be careful. Tian Chanzi immediately saw through the profoundness of the formation, and reminded everyone. Everyone braced themselves as the 36 swords were about to arrive. The 36 swords seemed to have eyes, and automatically split into several parts, each attacking their opponent, but at the same time responding to each other. Tang Jing was shocked. This sword formation was not simple. As expected of the sword pavilion, they had their own unique understanding of the way of the sword, and they also understood the essence of it. Without a doubt, the existing warriors in the sword pavilion were unable to control their swords from a distance, but they could use the sword formation to achieve a similar effect. But looking at the 36 swords that were moving freely, Tang Jing remained calm and composed. Seeing a few swords flying over, he waved his War Soul sword, and with a clang, sparks flew, all of them slashing onto the swords. However, he felt a huge rebound force being transmitted from the War Soul sword to his palm. Furthermore, with one strike, the War Soul sword was not able to break this seemingly ordinary sword. The sword formation gave these seemingly ordinary swords different characteristics. Humph, you want to stop us with just a mere method? Tang Jing growled. The War Soul sword shone brightly, the sacred artifact's power completely erupted, and a sword flew out. Shwa! A lightning-like sword light shot out from the War Soul sword, directly slashing towards one of the swords. The person controlling the sword seemed to have sensed the danger and hurriedly retreated. However, it was already too late. Tang Jiang's aura had firmly locked onto the sword. Crack! With a crisp sound, the sword light directly split the sword into two. The sword formation was damaged, and its power was greatly reduced. Some of the swords seemed to be drunk as they started to sway. The others were all experts, so how could they miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Thus, they took the opportunity to counterattack. With the sound of battle, the sword formation was broken. The 36 swords broke one after another, and all of the attacks disappeared into nothingness. Everyone smiled knowingly. The tip of their feet tapped on the cliff, and then they soared into the air, steadily landing on the top of the Divine Sword Peak. The sword furnace immediately appeared in front of everyone. The sword furnace was not big. It was like a straw hut, extremely simple and crude. However, in the eyes of an expert, this sword furnace was not simple at all. Every blade of grass and every tree contained the way of the sword. No wonder the sword god was comprehending sword techniques in the sword furnace. This place was indeed unique. Just by looking at it, it firmly attracted everyone's attention. However, their attention was immediately attracted by another matter. Chapter 943. In front of the sword furnace, a figure stood proudly like a desolate ancient sword. His two sword-like eyebrows were raised high, filled with sword intent. Qi Sha. This person was the sword god's disciple. He had fought with Tang Jing and the others in the Changbai Mountains. Tang Jing's expression was slightly cold as he stared at him. Compared to before, Qi Sha's aura was completely different. His cultivation had clearly improved by a lot. He still remembered Qi Sha's rising sun sword technique, so he did not underestimate him. However, with so many experts around him, he did not fear him. Tang Jing, it really is you! Qi Sha's tone was filled with boundless killing intent. You killed my master. This time, I will make you pay with your blood. Qi Sha, are you the only one? Where is Song Yu? Isn't he the one in charge of the sword pavilion? Tang Jing asked curiously. 7 Kills said coldly. Cut the crap. You'll have to get past me first. Alright, then I will test your skills. Tang Jing took a large step forward but was beaten to it by Marshall. Let me, Marshall said. Sword God's disciple, if you miss this opportunity, you won't have it again. The meaning of these words was very thought-provoking. The Sword God's bloodline would no longer exist from today onwards. Therefore, she rushed to fight with Qixia. To her, Qixia was a very good opponent to train her martial arts. Ever since she started cultivating the fire underworld divine palm, her cultivation had greatly increased. Now, she had reached the limit of a Xiantian martial artist, 9th grade Xiantian. She was only a step away from the great scholar realm. This kind of cultivation speed was simply unimaginable to her in the past. She had once fantasized that if she reached the great scholar realm in her 30s, she would already be considered very powerful. But now, she was only in her 20s and was actually about to reach the great scholar realm. She was even more powerful than her master and master's wife. She was very clear on who the greatest credit should belong to. Qixia understood the deep meaning of Wu's words. His anger burned more and more. He said, Wu, you are in cahoots with these cultivators. I will take your life first and offer it to my master's spirit in heaven. Shua! He shook the long sword in his hand and performed the rising sun sword technique. The light at the tip of the long sword was as bright as the sun. It slowly rose from the sword, as if a red sun had risen from the sea. Marshall crossed his palms, one cold and one hot, the two attributes alternating in the center of his palms. Now, she had a deeper understanding of the Netherfire divine palm, and she understood more about the extraordinariness of this cultivation technique. When she first started cultivating the Inferno divine palm, it was very domineering, very similar to the roaring flame saber that she used to cultivate. But later on, she gradually realized that when things reached an extreme, they would move in the opposite direction. When the inner strength that was like a red flame was cultivated to the extreme, it actually gave birth to an extremely cold inner strength. Fire gives birth to cold, and when things reach an extreme, they will reverse themselves. This made her feel the profoundness of this palm technique. It was precisely because of this transformation that her power had advanced by leaps and bounds, and her body had reached a miraculous state of harmony between yin and yang. At this moment, when she used this set of palm techniques, her palms alternated between hot and cold. In the end, her left hand was cold, and her right hand was hot. If it was anyone else, they would have been tormented long ago, but she would not. 2 waves of inner strength silently circulated within her body. 7 Kills could also see that this set of palm techniques was extraordinary. He still roared and thrusted his sword forward. The sun-like sword light suddenly exploded, transforming into small sword chi. Like a shotgun, countless sword chi shot towards Marshall like marbles. Marshall did not say a word. Both of his palms fiercely pushed forward. A vast and mighty palm wind that alternated between cold and hot swept forward, like a huge wave that could topple mountains and overturn the seas. Bang, 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 a series of explosions rang out as the palm wind and the sword chi collided. The two of them tapped their toes and rushed towards each other at the same time. In an instant, in front of the sword furnace, the two of them were like graceful butterflies, rising and falling as they fought. Although Marshall did not have a weapon, his hands did not lose to a weapon, especially the Netherfire divine palm. Cold and hot alternated, blazing and cold palm winds swept towards the opponent. The killing power was astonishing. Bang! A tree was struck by the palm and broke into 2. Ice gradually formed on the broken part, and even in the summer, it still emitted cold air. 7 Kills just happened to see this scene. His pupils constricted, his heart trembled, and he immediately slashed down with his sword. Puff! The sword chi was blazing. His sunrise sword art was also a very masculine sword art, so even the surging sword chi showed a masculine chi, which made people feel as if they were burning flames. The air shook and was slashed to the sides by the sword chi. Then, a rainbow pierced through the sun and the sharp sword pierced straight through, directly reaching the top of Marshall's head. Marshall growled, both of his hands rose into the air, clamping down on the sword. The surging sword chi immediately tried to harm her hands, but his palms released two waves of inner strength, one cold and one hot, resisting the sword chi. Moreover, the sword underwent a drastic change. One side seemed to be burned by flames, turning fiery red, while the other side seemed to be covered in ice, turning snow white. In addition, the cold and hot energy spread upwards, and soon, it reached the sword hilt. The entire sword body turned red on one side and white on the other, presenting a strange scene. Seven Kill's eyes widened as he looked at this scene in disbelief. He roared unwillingly, urging his inner strength to resist. However, crack! With a crisp sound, the sword broke inch by inch, turning into fragments that scattered on the ground. Seeing his sword destroyed, Seven Kills was heartbroken and furious, but there was nothing he could do. With a thought, Wu Xian pushed both of his palms forward. Ping ping, two palms struck Qisha's chest at the same time. Whiz! Seven Kills flew backwards into the sword furnace, leaving behind a long trail of blood in the air. Marshall took advantage of the opportunity to pursue and enter the sword furnace in a flash. This sword furnace was very simple and crude. It was a small pavilion made of straw, surrounded by simple wooden walls. Seven Kills broke the wooden door and entered the pitch-black sword furnace, while Marshall chased after him and disappeared into the darkness. Suddenly, Tang Jing became alert and shouted, "Don't chase after him!" In a flash, he chased after him, but just as he reached the door, a figure flew out. His gaze turned cold as he hurriedly caught it. It was Marshall that had fallen into his embrace. Marshall gasped for breath, his face pale, and said, "There's danger in the sword furnace." Seeing that she was fine, Tang Jing heaved a sigh of relief and comforted her. "You step back first, I'll take care of him." Marshall was a little angry. His strength was clearly higher than Seven Kills, but after entering the sword furnace, he somehow suffered a blow and was actually kicked out in a sorry state. "Be careful." Marshall clenched his teeth and warned. Tang Jing nodded his head lightly and walked into the sword furnace with large strides. When he crossed the threshold, a wave of hot air assaulted his face. Taking a closer look, he actually found a huge furnace in the middle of the sword furnace. It was filled with bubbling hot molten iron, and beside it were swords that had not been forged yet. They were bright red and emitting hot steam. Seven Kills stood in front of the furnace, staring straight at Tang Jing. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. His expression was dispirited, but his brows were extremely ferocious. "Tang Jing, you killed my master! I am not skilled enough, so I have no way of taking revenge for my master, but I will not admit defeat," Seven Kills said in a powerful voice. Tang Jing coldly snorted and asked, "Seven Kills, you are inverting black and white. If it wasn't for the sword god coming to kill me, how could he have died in our hands? Are we going to stretch out our necks and wait for death?" Seven Kills was speechless. After a long while he said, "I don't care. In any case, master died in your hands." Tang Jing shook his head. He did not want to argue with him, and said, "I only want to ask you one question. Where are the other people from Sword Pavilion? Where is Song Yu?" There were a total of several hundred sword slaves in Sword Pavilion, but they had met too few sword slaves along the way. Furthermore, they did not see any other sword slaves on the Divine Sword Peak, so he was very curious. Seven Kills said sinisterly, "Song Yu is the same as you, ambitious and cowardly. When he heard that you were attacking, he actually abandoned Sword Pavilion and escaped with his people. If Master knew in the underworld, he would definitely be ashamed and regret passing down Sword Pavilion to him." Seven Kills was angry and unwilling, but also heartbroken. Furthermore, there were two handprints on his chest, one red and one white, one fire and one cold, making him look even more desolate. "Escaped?" Tang Jing raised his eyebrows. This Song Yu was truly cunning. His ability to run away could be considered first class. Back in the capital, he had also escaped when the situation was bad. Now that he had heard the fighting outside, he did not hesitate to escape with a group of sword slaves. Those cowards deserve to die. They listened to Song Yu's bewitchment, and have already betrayed Sword Pavilion. They are not worthy of being Sword Pavilion's people. 7 Kills angrily accused. Tang Jing secretly nodded. After all, Song Yu was a member of a large family. He was eloquent, and had many methods to bewitch people. Of course, he was not someone who only knew martial arts like 7 Kills could compare to. In the Sword Pavilion, although Qi Sha's seniority was higher than Song Yu's, he couldn't compare to Song Yu in terms of small tricks. This result was not out of Tang Dang's expectations. However, the cook duck had flown away, which made Tang Jing very unhappy. He asked, "Where did they escape to?" "Don't say that I don't know. Even if I knew, I would definitely not tell you," 7 Kills said sinisterly. Tang Jing inwardly shook his head. He knew that he would not be able to dig out any useful information from him. 7 Kills, you were clearly not Marshall's match just now, but you forced her back and even injured her. You haven't used up all your tricks yet, right? This time, I will personally witness your skills because you will not have this chance in the future. Tang Jing had the confidence to say these words. 7 Kills did not refute him, but his eyes kept changing. In the end, he firmly locked onto Tang Jing. He became resolute and said, "I will die with you." Boom! With a loud sound, he overturned the furnace beside him. Fiery red molten iron spurted out from the furnace and splashed in all directions. The sword furnace immediately caught on fire. At the same time, 7 Kills grabbed an unfinished long sword from the furnace. The long sword was fiery red and sizzling sounds came from his palm. There was a burnt smell coming from it. However, he did not feel anything. Instead, his face was completely red as he pounced towards Tang Jing. The fiery red long sword in his hand lit up. The light was boundless, as if it really was a blazing sun, releasing all of its light and heat. Chapter 944. Tang Jing subconsciously soared into the air, dodging the magma like molten iron on the ground. A wave of heat rushed over as the 7 assassins stabbed over with their fiery red swords. The blood-like fiery red sword light stung people's eyes. Tang Jing squinted his eyes, and the War Soul's sword also released a dazzling light. Clang! The 2 swords clashed and sparks flew everywhere. A few sparks landed on Tang Jing's clothes and immediately ignited. Tang Jing immediately circulated his energy to extinguish the flames. The War Soul's sword in his hand danced, and a sword light scattered down, blocking all the flames outside his body. 7 Kills bared his teeth as he looked at Tang Jing. He knew very well that he was burning his life force, but so what? He was going to die together with him. The reason why his fighting strength could increase by so much in an instant was all because of the Rising Sun sword technique that he cultivated. This sword technique was extremely masculine and unyielding. After forcefully enduring the pain and holding on to a fiery red sword, all of his energy and inner strength were channeled into the sword. Instead, he and this unfinished sword had reached the realm of becoming one with the sword, perfectly displaying the power of the Rising Sun sword technique. Clang! Another sword strike. The War Soul's sword was undamaged, but a gap appeared on the other sword. Tang Jing laughed coldly. How could an unfinished sword be compared to the War Soul's sword? 7 Kills was also very clear about the situation. Looking at the broken sword in his hand, he gritted his teeth and cut open his other palm. Blood seeped out from his palm and dripped onto the broken sword. The blood and the broken sword merged into one, and the broken sword emitted waves of scarlet light. Tang Jing's pupils constricted. He knew that 7 Kills was making his last gamble, so he took the initiative to attack. 7 Kills quickly retreated, retreating again and again. Fresh blood completely fused into the broken sword as if it was free. The broken sword's light shone brightly, instantly enveloping him. Bang! 7 Kills retreated to the front of the furnace and stepped on the molten iron. However, he did not notice that the molten iron had corroded his shoes and feet, revealing his white bones. He only stared straight at Tang Jing, and the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a smile. It was incomparably sinister, causing one's heart to turn cold. Tang Jing, do you think that I am courting death by leading you into the sword furnace? Haha, you're too naive. I said that I'll take you down with me. That's why I'm confident. 7 Kills laughed maniacally. I don't see how you can take me down with you, Tang Jing retorted. Really? Then do you think this sword furnace is really a broken thatched hut? 7 Kills pointed around and asked jokingly. Tang Jing's heart skipped a beat. He looked around. This sword furnace contained sword intent. This was the place where the sword god used to comprehend sword techniques, so it was not surprising that it contained sword intent. It seems like you have seen through some clues, but without my guidance, you definitely wouldn't have known. The name Divine Sword Peak is not a random name. The sword intent in the sword furnace is naturally emitted back then. Master saw through this point, which is why he chose to comprehend the sword again, build the sword furnace, and forge the treasured sword because… He purposely stopped and looked at Tang Jing with a meaningful gaze. Because what? Tang Jing asked curiously, and his interest was indeed piqued by 7 Kills. Because there is indeed a divine sword hidden in the divine sword peak, but the divine sword is formless, only the sword intent, and the essence of the sword intent is all gathered in this sword furnace. Other than Master, only senior brother Jian Shi-san and I know this secret. Song Yu, that cowardly fellow, does not know. This sword intent is the foundation of why the sword pavilion is called the sword pavilion, 7 Kills said with pride. Tang Jing subconsciously looked towards the ground, where he stepped on a small piece of empty land that was not covered by molten iron. He could clearly feel this sword intent. However, the sword intent was too scattered, as if it had become one with the mountain peak. What use could it have? Master once wanted to forge a peerless divine sword, and had already thought of a way to absorb this sword intent from the divine sword peak. Unfortunately, he did not manage to wait for this day. What Master has not done, I will do for you. As soon as he finished speaking, the broken sword in his hand fiercely stabbed into the ground. Puff! The broken sword pierced into the rocks on the ground, all the way to the hilt. In that instant, the aura within the sword furnace changed drastically. All of the scattered sword intent quickly condensed and fused into the broken sword. Tang Jing's pupils constricted as he shouted, "Oh no!" and hurriedly slashed out with his sword, aiming for Chisha's head with a heavy force. If he was hit, 7 Kills would probably be cut into 2 halves. 7 Kills revealed a sinister smile and said, "It's already too late." Bang! The War Soul sword slashed through the air, but was blocked by an invisible force. Tang Jing was shocked. He understood that this was the work of the sword intent. Ha ha, I understand now. The momentum is unstoppable. Tang Jing, prepare to die. 7 Kills laughed wildly. Holding the sword hilt with both hands, he roared, "Rise!" Ka ka ka. The broken sword rubbed against the rocks, making a strange sound. In the end, the broken sword was completely pulled out. The fiery red sword looked as if it was forged from blood. The divine sword has been formed. Quickly die! The broken sword roared and raised both of its hands. Its entire body seemed to be on fire. Its eyes turned fiery red and its clothes emitted bursts of green smoke. As one with the sword, he bathed in the sword light. It was incomparably resplendent, and slowly rose into the sky, as if it was really a rising sun. Tang Jing was an expert in the way of the sword, so when he saw this scene, he immediately understood the power behind it. He hurriedly activated his cultivation, causing his innate qi to surge. The War Soul sword was good at absorbing yin qi, so it emitted a cold yin qi that enveloped Tang Jing. Kill! 7 Kills roared and turned into a ray of sword light. As one with the sword, he slashed towards Tang Jing. Tang Jing's eyes were bright and full of expression. Holding the sword with both hands, he watched as the fiery red sword light got closer and closer. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind and he subconsciously brandished the War Soul sword. The War Soul sword drew a beautiful arc. It seemed slow and gentle, but it accurately caught the broken sword. Clang! A wave of sword chi surged out, but neither of them retreated. Instead, they clenched their teeth. Tang Jing was surprised to recall that his previous strike was not the heaven-flying immortal sword technique, but the second move of the Taiji two-formed sword technique. Back then, he had learned a total of 2 moves, but he immediately forgot about them. He did not expect that the second move would appear on its own, causing him to subconsciously use it. The 2 swords were in a deadlock, but Tang Jing's mind flashed with a flash of inspiration. He actually learned the third move in a split second. Previously, he had always wanted to learn the third move, but he had never succeeded. He did not expect that he would actually succeed this time. He really could not understand this sword technique. But now was not the time to think about this. He had just learned it, and before he forgot it, he immediately used it. The War Soul sword swung to the left, as if there was a huge force pulling the broken sword to the left, and then to the right, drawing a large circle. A surge of energy immediately emerged from the circle. From the inside to the outside, from the bottom to the top, like a fountain, it soared into the sky. Boom! With a loud sound, the energy collided with the broken sword. The 2 swords were knocked away, and the 2 people flew backwards. Kacha! The gap on the broken sword grew bigger and bigger, like a spider web rapidly spreading out. In an instant, it covered the entire sword body, and then collapsed, turning into pieces that scattered on the ground. The light on 7 kills disappeared as well. His entire body seemed to have been sucked dry of blood. He was extremely thin, his body was like firewood, and his eye sockets were deep. He was like a completely different person from before. Tang Jing was also shocked by this scene. The power of the broken sword was actually so great, and the backlash to its owner was so terrifying. Impossible! How could this be? 7 kills looked at the pieces on the ground in a daze, as well as the monstrous sword she released from the broken sword. He danced around, as if he wanted to gather the sword chi. However, how could the formless sword chi gather towards him? It was all futile. But he was like a madman, running around the room. Not long after, his body was set on fire, but he did not know. Tang Jing secretly shook his head. This person had gone crazy. However, when he recalled the third move, he could not help but be deeply shocked by its power. But he was also dismayed to find that the third move had mysteriously disappeared from his mind, and he had no impression of how to use it at all. Sigh! He faintly sighed. This Taiji two-form sword technique was too strange. For a moment, he could not figure it out. 1-1. Suddenly, the war spirit sword trembled without any warning, and the sword spirit's voice sounded in his mind. Master, quickly absorb these sword chi. Otherwise, they will be wasted after they spread out. Tang Jing was overjoyed. He had actually neglected these precious sword chi. They were already ownerless, so how could he waste them? He immediately activated his power, causing the war spirit sword to shine brightly, and with a so sound, it flew into the air. Waves of sword chi seemed to have found their loved ones, and quickly gathered in the air. Whoosh whoosh. The war spirit sword continued to absorb, and the light became more and more intense, dazzling the eyes. Tang Jing was secretly delighted. The war spirit sword had a sword spirit, and was indeed extraordinary. Otherwise, without the sword spirit's reminder, he would have forgotten about this. With the sword spirit absorbing the sword intent on its own, he turned his attention to 7 kills and discovered that he had already fallen to the ground. His body was burning with flames, emitting crackling sounds, and was on the verge of death. Tang Jing shook his head, and said, You also hate Song Yu for betraying Sword Pavilion. I will get him to see you as soon as possible, so that you two can reunite. I can't accept this. I will kill you! 7 Kill's throat still emitted intermittent sounds. His killing intent still did not weaken. Tang Jing shook his head, and said, If the sword god was here to absorb the sword intent of the divine sword peak, then what he forged would be a peerless divine sword, and what you forged at the last minute is only a poor quality one, which is why you were defeated by my war spirit sword. Chapter 945. Hearing Tang Zheng's analysis, 7 kills roared unwillingly, but his voice suddenly stopped. His head heavily hit the ground, and then there was no more sound. 7 killed. Tang Zheng shook his head, and then placed his attention on the War Soul sword above his head. The War Soul sword had already absorbed all the sword intent in the sword furnace, and the light suddenly converged, and then instantly exploded. A glaring sword light lit up, and Tang Zheng subconsciously closed his eyes. When he opened them, he discovered that there was an additional person in front of him. No, this was not a real person, because there was no trace of life. It was as if it was formed from interweaving light and shadow. This person's face had a vaguely familiar outline. When Tang Zheng moved his head, he immediately recognized it and exclaimed, "War Soul!" This person was actually a miniature version of the War Soul. Back then, the War Soul was just a Yin soul, ferocious and terrifying, with a huge body. Now that he had returned to the size of a normal person, Tang Zheng was actually unable to recognize him. Ever since the War Soul sword absorbed the Sword Soul and fused with the Sword Soul, the War Soul had never appeared again. Tang Zheng thought that it would never appear again, but he never thought that it would appear again. "Master, I am the Sword Soul," the other party said methodically. "Sword One Soul?" Tang Zheng was stunned. "You can actually leave the War Soul sword?" The Sword Soul nodded. "Yes, I merged with the original War Soul and became like this. It's just that my appearance is the original War Soul." Tang Zheng suddenly realized that the Sword Soul was the War Soul. There was no difference. He was overjoyed and subconsciously extended his hand, wanting to touch the other party, but discovered that his hand had directly passed through the Sword Soul's body. He was shocked and hurriedly asked what was going on. The Sword Soul was not surprised and said, "Master, after I absorbed those sword intents, I used them to condense them. However, I am not a real entity, I am just a strand of sword intent." Tang Zheng patted his head. So that was how it was, but even so, the shock it gave him could be imagined. "Then what can you do?" Tang Zheng calmed down and asked curiously. The sword spirit thought for a while, then gently tapped the ground with his finger. The War Soul sword that was floating in the air did not move at all, but the rocky ground immediately cracked open, as if it was split open by a sword. Hiss! Tang Zheng sucked in a breath of cold air. The power of the sword spirit was indeed extraordinary, and it could attack autonomously. In other words, when he fought with others in the future, the sword spirit could leave the battle soul sword and catch the enemy off guard. "Master, as long as you think about it, I can attack the enemy without the help of the War Soul sword's main body," the sword spirit added. Tang Zheng nodded happily and praised loudly. "Good, good, good! Tang Zheng, what do you think of my gift to you?" Chiyu's voice rang out. Back then in the sky pit in the northeast, it was with his help that the War Soul sword was able to fuse with the Sword Soul. Otherwise, with Tang Zheng's strength, how could he have succeeded in something that even the Sword God could not do? Tang Zheng understood this very well, so he was not stingy with his praise for Chiyu. "This gift is very good. I like it very much." "Thank you." "Haha, inner demons, did you hear that? How can your mind assimilating technique be compared to the sword spirit? The sword spirit will be of great use to Tang Zheng in the future." Chiyu proudly showed off. The inner demons coldly snorted and retorted, "My mind assimilating technique is stronger than your sword spirit. Hee hee, you're a stubborn duck. Tang Zheng, let me tell you, as the quality of the War Soul sword increases, the sword spirit will also evolve. In the end, it can even evolve into a physical body. You should be very clear about what this means," Chiyu said as if he was asking for credit. Tang Zheng was in full bloom. Of course, he understood what this meant. If the sword spirit really evolved into a physical body, then it would be like a sword expert. This kind of expert was condensed from sword intent, and he could not imagine how high his achievements would be in the future. A person's every word and action, even a frown, was a sword intent. If he wanted to kill someone, he didn't even need to attack. The air could be condensed into a sharp sword by him, and take his head. He stared at the sword spirit without blinking. It was hard to imagine what kind of scene it would be when that day came. However, there was no doubt that the sword spirit was under his control. "Chi-Yu, thank you!" He sincerely thanked him. "Haha, you're welcome. This way, you'll know that I'm really good to you. I'm not like some people who only talk about it but don't practice it. It's just a little bit of profit, yet they dare to brag all day long." Chi-Yu did not let go of this opportunity to attack the inner demons. The inner demons was silent. He sulked and did not say a word. Tang Jing secretly rejoiced. "Inner demons, you better find a big benefit for me and then counterattack Chi-Yu. This way, you can get back at me. However, my benefits are great. Master, I'm still weak for the time being. I can't stay outside for too long. I want to return to the war spirit sword," the sword spirit said. Tang Jing happily nodded his head. "Then hurry up and go in. Don't hurt yourself." With a flash of light, the sword spirit disappeared. It turned into thousands of sword intents and merged into the war spirit sword. The war spirit sword automatically flew back into Tang Deng's hands. The sword spirit's voice sounded in his mind. "Master, the war spirit sword's power has increased greatly. The power of your heaven-flying immortal sword technique will also increase by a lot." Hearing this, Tang Jing secretly nodded his head. He held the sword hilt, and with a thought, he used the heaven-flying immortal sword technique. In an instant, a dazzling sword light broke through the air. Boom! With a loud bang, the sword furnace exploded. It was already in a dilapidated state, and after being burned by the fire, it was as if it had been hit by a cannonball. It exploded from the inside, and debris flew in all directions, filling the sky. Empyrean Fairy and the rest had been staring at the sword furnace the entire time, especially Wu. Just now, Tang Jing had saved her and rushed into the sword furnace for her. When she heard the sounds of fighting coming from inside, her heart was in her throat. She really wanted to rush in and help Tang Jing, but was stopped by Empyrean Fairy. Empyrean Fairy said that this was a rare opportunity for Tang Jing to deal with it himself, and that there would definitely be no danger. Tian Chanzi also said the same thing. Although Wu was extremely worried, he could only stare at the sword furnace. Lan Yu held her husband's hand tightly with one hand and covered her chest with the other, feeling the intense heartbeat coming from her chest. She was the same as Wu, but after hearing the words of Empyrean Fairy and Tian Chanzi, she endured it. Moreover, she believed in the words of the two, and she believed in Tang Deng's strength even more. Seeing the sword furnace ignite with raging flames and the terrifying sword intent that blotted out the sky and covered the earth being released, Lan Yu and Wu almost couldn't help but rush over. The strength of this sword intent caused Tian Chanzi's eyebrows to twitch a few times. He smacked his lips a few times and sighed. The world is big, there are all sorts of strange things. So that's how it is. I was wondering why this mountain was so strange, so it actually contained such a powerful sword intent. But he still did not move, and Empyrean Fairy was even calmer, so the others did not dare to act rashly. In the end, with a loud explosion, the sword furnace turned into ruins and flew in all directions. Empyrean Fairy stood at the very front. With a wave of her small hand, a gust of wind blew out. The ruins were completely blocked outside, unable to harm them in the slightest. Tang Jing felt his eyes light up, and everything suddenly became clear. The mountain breeze blew past his face, and seeing everyone looking at him with a burning gaze, he could not help but smile and say, "I'm fine." Wu Fei threw himself into his embrace and said with lingering fear, "It's good that you're fine." Tang Jing ignored everyone's strange gazes and felt her concern and love from the bottom of her heart. He lovingly caressed her hair and said, "I'm fine, don't worry, how could 7 kills hurt me?" Wu Chui said angrily, "It's all because I'm useless. I've practiced the Fire Nether Divine Palm for so long, but I still can't beat 7 kills. Tang Jing shook his head and explained, "No, you've already defeated him. It's just that he used the method of burning his life force, and the sword furnace was filled with boundless sword intent. In that instant, His fighting strength had already risen to the Grandmaster realm, so of course you're not his match. Wu thought for a while, then revealed a knowing smile. That's good. Cough. Wu Junshan coughed dryly, interrupting their kiss. Wu Junshan's face turned red, and she quickly left his embrace. Lan Yu glared at her husband with hidden bitterness, as if she was complaining about how he had disturbed their good fortune. Wu Junshan helplessly rolled his eyes. Empyrean Fairy did not care about the subtle relationship between the few of them. She stared straight at the War Soul Sword in his hand and asked, "Your War Soul Sword has undergone a change. What exactly happened?" Tang Jing smiled faintly. He did not hide anything and told her everything that had happened in the sword furnace. Everyone was dumbstruck when they heard this. Their hearts trembled in fear, especially Wu. He subconsciously tightened his grip on Tang Jing's hand, unwilling to let go. This time, it was a rare time for her and Tang Jing to be alone, so she actually cherished this period of time. Moreover, everyone already knew about her relationship with Tang Jing, so why hide it? She was not the kind of girl who was shy, so she might as well be magnanimous. She did not want to take advantage of Li Xiaotian, who was always by Tang Jing's side. She subconsciously looked at Li Xiaotian and discovered that she was staring at Tang Jing with shining eyes. It was as if his words had a huge attraction that made her unwilling to move her gaze away. Wu's heart skipped a beat, and he subconsciously grabbed onto Tang Jing's hand. Suddenly, he had a subtle feeling. Could it be? She hurriedly shook her head. No, although she had changed her appearance and become a new person, she definitely could not have any intimate relationship with Tang Jing. She had to take on the responsibility of supervising him. The others' attention was attracted by everything that had happened in the sword furnace. They were unable to calm down for a long time, especially Tian Chanzi. He looked at the War Soul Sword and said, "So you're saying that your War Soul Sword has evolved, and the sword's spirit can already leave the War Soul Sword's body?" This was something he had never heard of before. Even the most powerful divine sword he had ever seen did not have such an ability. Tang Jing nodded. Tian Chanzi sighed in his heart. This was truly the Yangtze River's waves behind the waves. He was afraid that before long, the waves in front of him would be smacked onto the beach. Chapter 946. The Empyrean Fairy lightly said, "Tang Jing, the sword soul can leave the battle soul sword body. This is already a 1 in 10,000 chance. But if you want to obtain the physical body you speak of, this is a very long road. In any case, according to what I know, the number of people in this world who can do this can be counted on one hand." Tang Jing's enthusiasm was not extinguished. He still happily said, "Even so, I have already taken the first step. In the future it is only a matter of time." Seeing him so confident, the Empyrean Fairy did not say anything more. Moreover, this was indeed a good thing. Lan Yu was more excited than the others, his eyes shining as he looked at his son and praised. "I believe you can do it." Wu Junshan also looked at Tang Jing with gratification. On the way here, he once again personally felt that Tang Jing was not ordinary. This feeling was even more profound than the last time he was in the island nation. "Thank you." Tang Jing politely nodded towards them. Although he felt a little unfamiliar, it was still much better than before, making Lan Yu and Wu Junshan very happy. Li Xiaotian realized that other than herself, the others were all concerned about Tang Jing. Her bright eyes could not help but dim as she gradually lowered her head. No one knew what she was thinking. "Since Song Yu and the other sword slaves have already escaped, what do we do now?" Tian Chanzi asked. Sigh. Tang Jing muttered to himself for a moment, then said, "Sword Pavilion no longer exists, even though Song Yu is not dead, but since he has escaped, we will definitely not be able to find him in a short period of time, so there is no need to waste time on him. Let's follow the established itinerary and head to Li Palace." Li Palace had already taken root in a new place. This was the information that Li Xiaotian read in her mind. Since Sword Pavilion no longer existed, Li Palace naturally could not let it go. They had to quickly cut the Gordian knot and take advantage of this momentum to exhaust the strength of the Azure Dragon Hall and the other large organizations. Li Xiaotian already knew that she was from the Li Palace, so when she heard that they were going to attack the Li Palace, her heart couldn't help but tighten. Her expression became panicked, but she quickly regained her composure. She secretly warned herself that since she had decided to sever all ties with the past, this trip to the Li Palace was necessary. In fact, she could only be considered to have truly severed all ties with her former self after this trip. Tang Jing noticed something wrong with Li Xiaotian and asked, "Are you okay?" Li Xiaotian shook her head and said, "I'm fine." She paused for a moment and said hesitantly, "Tang Jing, I have a presumptuous request." "What is it?" "Just tell me. If I can do it, I will definitely not refuse." Hearing this, everyone looked at her curiously. With regards to Li Xiaotian, everyone's feelings towards her were rather complicated. However, in general, they had already forgiven her. They didn't know that she would make such a presumptuous request. Wu's heart tightened as she stared straight at Li Xiaotian, afraid that she would say something that would make her worried. "You said before that I originally knew martial arts, but I lost my memories, so I even forgot my martial arts. Then, can you think of a way to help me recover my martial arts?" Li Xiaotian looked at Tang Jing expectantly, afraid that he would refuse or say that he was powerless. Tang Jing was silent, because he didn't know if he could do it. This was a situation that he had never encountered before. Seeing Tang Deng's reaction, Li Xiaotian's eyes dimmed, the corner of her mouth revealed a bitter smile, and said, "If there's no other way, then forget it. This is just a fool's dream. This is the punishment given to me by the heavens, and I am willing to accept it. Don't worry." Seeing her so pessimistic, Tang Jing hurriedly comforted her. "I didn't say that there's absolutely no way, it's just that this is the first time I've encountered such a thing, so I can't think of a good idea right now. But since your martial arts are still in your body, then there must be a way to reactivate it." Tang Jing recalled the scene of the car accident when she saved the little girl. He could confirm that her martial arts were still there, but she needed a trigger condition. Li Xiaotian's heart was once again ignited with the flames of hope, and said, "Really? That's great. In any case, we still have a long way to go to the Li Palace. On the way, I will think about it carefully and find a way," Tang Jing said truthfully. Li Xiaotian jumped up in excitement, and couldn't help but throw herself into his embrace. In an instant, the divine sword peak became completely silent, leaving only the whistling of the wind. Tang Jing's expression stiffened. He never thought that Li Xiaotian's reaction would be so big. He almost didn't have time to react before he felt a warm and soft body being stuffed into his embrace. He could even clearly feel the soul-stirring elasticity of her chest. Wu originally held on to Tang Jing's hand, and when he saw Li Xiaotian throw herself into his embrace, his eyes widened. The thing he was most worried about had happened. She actually took the initiative to throw herself into his embrace. This was too shameless. Wu Junshan and Lani looked at each other, as if they didn't expect such a thing to happen. The enemy throwing herself into one's embrace was something that only happened in movies. How could it happen in reality? And it even happened to their son. This was truly a headache. Tian Chanzi, on the other hand, had an indifferent expression. He looked at Tang Jing with a smile that wasn't a smile. Empyrean Fairy was indifferent, as if all of this had nothing to do with her. Tang Jing wasn't in the mood to enjoy this beauty's grace. Moreover, he also felt strange in his heart. After all, he and Li Xiaotian had been opposing each other for so long, and he wasn't a beast. As long as a woman threw herself into his arms, he would like it, so he pushed her out of his embrace and said calmly, "When I find a way, I will naturally help you." Li Xiaotian nodded his head continuously, the smile on his face becoming more and more brilliant. "Let's go." Tang Jing turned around and left, holding on to Wu's hand. He had seen Wu's reaction just now, so of course he could not provoke her at this time. Otherwise, he would not be able to walk in the end, and he did not want his backyard to be on fire because of Li Xiaotian. Sure enough, seeing him tightly holding on to her hand, Wu's expression became much better. She meaningfully glanced at Li Xiaotian, then obediently accompanied Tang Jing down the mountain peak. The two of them took the lead and walked at the front, leaving the others a distance behind. Li Xiaotian fiercely twisted his arm and complained. She threw herself into your arms just now. Are you very happy? Tang Jing couldn't help but laugh. The usually carefree Wu was actually jealous. Women's bones were indeed not much different. You're still laughing. You must be secretly happy, right? Wu said bitterly. Tang Jing retracted his smile and hurriedly explained. You are wronging me. I saw that you were beautiful, so I smiled at you. I didn't smile because of Li Xiaotian's hug. Wu heaved a sigh of relief in his heart, and his face immediately revealed it. Although her martial arts were strong, in terms of meticulousness and shrewdness, she could not compare to Yi Dingdang. If Yi Dingdang were to encounter such a situation, even if he was very happy in his heart, he would definitely keep a straight face on the surface. Seeing her reaction, Tang Jing felt relieved. Taking advantage of the fact that no one was around, he turned his head and kissed her. The two of them were about the same height, so he did not need to bend down. He only needed to turn his head to kiss her cheek. Immediately, 2 red clouds flew up on her face. She was extremely shy. On the battlefield, she was a decisive expert. But in front of love, she was still no different from an ordinary girl. She raised her fist, as if massaging it, and hit Tang Zheng's body. She said coquettishly, You are too bad. Everyone else is watching. Tang Zheng chuckled. They are still behind. How can they see? Moreover, even if they see, they will pretend not to see. They will definitely understand the principle of not looking. Flowery words, sophistry. Wu glared at him and said, You don't want me to say it? Then I'll go tell the person behind me. Tang Jing rolled his eyes and said with a mischievous smile, You dare! Wu immediately widened his eyes and glared at him like a tiger eyeing its prey. Tang Jing laughed out loud and quickly kissed her again. This time, he kissed her lips, causing her entire body to tremble. She could not help but lean against him tightly, her entire body going soft. Tang Jing directly hugged her waist. She struggled a few times, but was unable to escape from his clutches, so she let him do whatever he wanted. Although she was shy in her heart, she enjoyed it very much. Occasionally, she would glance back and see that the others were still far away. She could not help but heave a sigh of relief. At least they did not see her embarrassed state. The road down the mountain was not long, and the two of them enjoyed a rare intimate time. By the time they reached the foot of the mountain, Wu's face was already red and he was panting. If it wasn't for the fact that this place was not suitable, the two of them would have already fought for 300 rounds. Wu did not want the others to catch up and discover his embarrassing state, so he immediately pulled away from Tang Jing and circulated his energy to calm his surging emotions. His cheeks and breathing slowly returned to normal. The others finally caught up. Although they discovered that the two of them had normal expressions, as if nothing had happened, they knew that something must have happened between the two of them. They deliberately pretended not to know and did not point it out. However, Lan Yu looked at Wu with eyes full of praise and encouragement. He thought to himself that it was not a waste of his daily guidance. This girl had finally become enlightened. There were too many women in the family, and it was impossible to spread the rain and dew evenly. This was a rare time to be alone, and if he was still hesitant, it would be snatched away by others such as Li Xiaotian. She subconsciously looked at Li Xiaotian, but found that his expression was normal, as if nothing had happened. Her heart was moved. Li Xiaotian had always been known for his intelligence and cunning. Although she had lost her memories, this kind of nature still existed. In terms of scheming, he would probably surpass Wu. She immediately felt a sense of danger. She had to keep a good relationship between her son and Wu. She could not really let Li Xiaotian snatch her son away. Moreover, the Holy Maiden of Li Palace had also cultivated charm techniques. In terms of dealing with men, she was even more formidable. Many women could not compare to her. Just as expected, although they had successfully passed through the valley, the moment they appeared in the middle of the valley, they were still discovered by the vigilant Li Palace disciples. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, a series of whistling sounds came from afar, and a group of people rushed in front of them in the blink of an eye, blocking their way. Suddenly, a cry of surprise rang out from the crowd. Everyone looked at Li Xiaotian in surprise and subconsciously shouted, "Saintess, why are you back? You're not dead?" The disciples of the Li Palace had also been misled by the news sent back by Song Yu, mistakenly believing that Li Xiaotian had already died in the battle for the imperial city. They had never expected that he would once again stand in front of them, alive and well. Their faces immediately lit up with joy as they welcomed her warmly and cheered. "Saintess, everyone thought you had died. If the palace master knew you were still alive, he would definitely be very happy." Looking at these familiar faces, Li Xiaotian didn't know how to respond. He stood there in a daze, not knowing what to do. "Wait a moment!" An ear-piercing voice rang out from the crowd. A woman stepped forward and pointed at Tang Deng's group, asking, "Why are they here? These people are all enemies, and there are even men." The Li Palace had a rule that forbade men from setting foot in. If a man did, there was only one outcome: death. Moreover, although these people had never personally seen Tang Zheng's group, they were still intelligence collectors, so they had seen their pictures and recognized them at a glance. These were enemies, so why had they appeared in the Li Palace? And why had they appeared together with the Saintess? They immediately sensed something strange. "Saintess, just what is going on?" They subconsciously took a step back and warily asked. On the way here, Li Xiaotian had already learned a great deal about her relationship with the Li Palace, and she also understood that she was the Li Palace's Saintess. When she heard the crowd's questions, she was at a loss at first, her mind in a mess, but for some reason, she was quick-witted and quickly calmed down. As if this place had triggered a nerve in her, the panic in her eyes disappeared in a flash, replaced by an unrestrained sharpness. Without being angry, she took a large step forward, eyeing the crowd like a tiger eyeing its prey. Seeing her overbearing gaze, the crowd subconsciously averted their gazes, not meeting her gaze. After all, her usual dignity was still there, deeply imprinted in their bones. Tang Jing had originally believed that he had been exposed, so a fight was unavoidable. Now that he saw Li Xiaotian's reaction, he actually had the misconception that the decisive and ruthless Saintess of the Li Palace had returned. But he was not in a hurry to make a move, and instead quietly observed the situation. The others also curiously looked at Li Xiaotian. On the way here, because of Wu and Tang Jing, Li Xiaotian had become much quieter. Although she would occasionally raise a few questions about herself and the Li Palace, there was nothing out of the ordinary. Li Xiaotian swept her sharp gaze across the crowd and said, "My matters, when did you have the right to question them?" This voice was not loud, but it was filled with an unquestionable dignity, causing everyone to be subconsciously startled. This tone was exactly the same as the previous Li Xiaotian's. The Li Palace disciples lowered their heads. Normally, Li Xiaotian had this kind of attitude in the Li Palace. She was the high and mighty Saintess, the chosen candidate for the next generation's palace master. Other than the palace master, everyone else had to listen to her orders, and no one had ever dared to question her actions. Tang Jing and the others were even more surprised than the Li Palace disciples. This was because Li Xiaotian's change was too great, as if she was a completely different person. It made people wonder if she had really lost her memories. However, this thought only flashed through their minds. This was because they were certain that Li Xiaotian had really lost her memories. All of this was an act, but the act was too perfect, no different from the real thing. This was the amazing part. Lan Yu's eyes flickered as he sighed in his heart. Although Li Xiaotian had lost her memories, many of her body's intrinsic qualities had not been lost, such as this quick-wittedness. If it was anyone else, perhaps they would have already panicked and revealed their true colors. But Li Xiaotian calmed down in an instant. She could simply take the crown of Best Actress. Li Xiaotian is really too smart and cunning. Although her nature is not bad, if she occasionally has a little thought, others would not be able to detect it. They are simply not her opponent. It may not be a good thing to keep this kind of person by my son's side. Lan Yu had this preconceived idea. The more he watched Li Xiaotian's perfect performance, the more he felt it was unreliable. Li Xiaotian looked at the crowd with a fierce aura and asked, "Where is the palace master?" "The palace master has already left for some time." Li Xiaotian frowned. "Where did she go?" "Holy maiden, did the palace master leave before you left and still not return?" "Only you know where she went." Li Xiaotian was shocked. How could she remember where the palace master went? But she still did not reveal it. She nodded slightly and said, "Then I know. Holy maiden, these people are enemies. Why did you bring them to the Li Palace?" "If the palace master knew, she would definitely fly into a rage." Someone cautiously glanced at Tang Jing and the others, wanting to say something but hesitating. In the end, he could not hold back and asked. Li Xiaotian coldly smiled and mysteriously said, "This is the palace master's arrangement." If you can also comprehend the profound meaning within, then wouldn't you all become the palace master? Everyone hurriedly lowered their heads and said with fear and trepidation, "This subordinate does not dare to question the palace master's decision. Since it is the palace master's order, then we will carry it out." Tang Jing sighed in his heart. Li Xiaotian had really given him a big surprise. Turning hostility into friendship, there was no need to use swords against each other. These ordinary disciples of the Li Palace did not pose too much of a threat to him. His main enemy was Granny Li. As long as she died, the others would be scattered soldiers and disbanded like a sheet of loose sand. Seeing that he had shocked these people, Li Xiaotian's lips curled into a faint smile. He lightly nodded and ordered, "Quickly prepare a room. I want to entertain these guests." "Yes." Someone hurriedly left. Tang Jing and the others looked at her in astonishment. They did not know why she had stayed behind. Since Granny Li was no longer in the Li Palace, then they should go find her. But in front of so many disciples of the Li Palace, they could not refute her decision. Otherwise, they would definitely be exposed. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. In the end, they decided to wait and see. They followed her to the center of the Li Palace. In the village with a small bridge and flowing water, there were many houses built in picturesque disorder. Along the way, there were many people secretly sizing up this group of people. The Li Palace was filled with women. Besides the women who were outside collecting information, many of the women had never left the Li Palace in their entire lives. They had never seen the outside world, and had never even seen a stranger. They lived every day in this palm-sized place. So after dispelling their hostility, many people were very curious about this stranger who had come for the first time. Once everyone had been properly settled and the others had been dismissed, the cold and harsh expression on Li Xiaotian's face disappeared. He smiled and said, "I'm sorry. I did not ask for everyone's opinion before making this decision." Everyone was silent. They stared at him without blinking. Li Xiaotian was somewhat alarmed. He hurriedly said, "If it's not appropriate, we will leave now." Tang Jing broke the silence and asked, "Tell us your reason. Why should we stay?" Li Xiaotian breathed a sigh of relief and confidently said, "At that time, they said that the Li Palace Empress had already left, and that no one knew where she went. Moreover, it seemed that only I knew. I thought that perhaps if we stayed, we could track her whereabouts. This would be more advantageous to us. Otherwise, finding a needle in a haystack would be too difficult." Hearing this, everyone's eyes brightened. At that critical juncture, he was able to think of so many things. His meticulousness was truly not something an ordinary person could compare to. Seeing that no one had any opinion, Li Xiaotian said, "I acted on my own accord. I hope that everyone will not take offense. In the future, I will definitely discuss this matter with all of you." At this moment, he was like a completely different person from before. It made people wonder if he was the same person. Chapter 948. Hearing Tang Jing say that he knew where Granny Li went, everyone looked at him curiously and urged him to speak. Tang Jing had previously learned from Li Xiaotian that Granny Li went to the northwest, but he did not know what she was going to do. However, looking at it now, she had been gone for such a long time that it was definitely not a small matter. What could be in the northwest? The desert. There was also the Tree of Life. Perhaps only the Tree of Life could attract so much of her energy. Previously, Tang Jing did not pay attention to this news, but now he realized that he had overlooked such an important piece of information. She went to the northwest desert, probably for the Tree of Life, Tang Jing said. The Tree of Life? Everyone was shocked. Besides Li Xiaotian, everyone had more or less heard about the Tree of Life, especially Wu, Tian Chanzi, and Empyrean Fairy. The Tree of Life is extremely important. We cannot afford to lose it. Tian Chanzi's expression was serious. The Tree of Life was related to the destiny of this world, and even the opportunity to advance to a large world, so it could not be lost. Li Xiaotian looked at everyone blankly and asked, "What is the Tree of Life?" "It's hard to explain in a few words." Tang Jing shook his head and did not explain further. "Oh." Li Xiaotian's brows flashed with a trace of disappointment, but he did not ask any more questions. "This matter should not be delayed, then we will immediately leave for the northwest desert." Tian Chanzi was impatient. Tang Jing was about to nod when he heard Li Xiaotian say, "There is something I want to discuss with everyone." "What is it?" "There are so many people in the Li Palace, and not all of them are bad people. Even if they do bad things, many people have no choice but to do so. Can you not kill them?" Li Xiaotian looked at Tang Jing with shining eyes and pleaded. No one expected that she would plead for mercy for the disciples of the Li Palace. They could not help but have a strange expression, as if this was too different from before. However, when he thought about how she had sacrificed herself to save a little girl whom she had never met before, it was not difficult to understand her actions. Li Xiaotian looked at Tang Jing nervously and asked, "Can I?" Along the way, she had seen them slaughter the flying guillotine of the Azure Dragon Hall and the Sword Pavilion's sword slaves. Her heart was moved for a moment. There were so many girls outside, and quite a few of them were still underage. They were all newcomers nurtured by the Li Palace. If she really did kill them, how could she bear to do it? Tang Jing suddenly laughed and said, "Who said I was going to kill them? I am not a homicidal maniac." "Huh!" Li Xiaotian was stunned for a moment, and was pleasantly surprised. "Really?" Tang Jing nodded. Of course, what he said was true. Li Xiaotian immediately showed a brilliant smile, grateful. "You are really too kind. Although these people have made mistakes in the past, they do not deserve to die. I believe that they will be able to turn over a new leaf. Moreover, if you defeat the palace master, then these people will be like a group of dragons without a leader. We can still think of a way to take them in for our own use." "Eh?" Hearing her idea, everyone was astonished. So she actually had such a plan, one that no one else had considered. Seeing that Tang Jing was somewhat unconvinced, Li Xiaotian said, "Perhaps you don't think highly of their fighting strength, but according to what you said, the Li Palace's fighting strength has never been the Li Palace's strong point. The Li Palace's key value lies in its intelligence network." Everyone's eyes brightened. Although Li Xiaotian did not have a sufficient understanding of the overall situation, her words had pointed out the crux of the matter. This was truly commendable. Although her words were reasonable, Tang Jing did not completely agree. After all, these people had been nurtured by the Li Palace for so many years. If he wanted them to pledge allegiance to him, it would not be an easy matter. If he made a mistake, he would just be lifting a rock and smashing his own foot. Li Xiaotian was incomparably intelligent, and immediately sensed Tang Jing's thoughts. She volunteered, "I can guarantee that I can take these people in and have them serve you." Her every move was unexpected and made everyone have a whole new level of respect for her. Tang Jing and the others looked at each other in dismay, as if they were pondering over the meaning of her actions. Seeing that she kept looking at him, Tang Jing did not want to disappoint her and said, "If you really have the confidence, it's not impossible to give it a try." Li Xiaotian happily nodded her head. Don't worry, I will definitely succeed. After pausing for a moment, she continued. It's just that there is a problem right now, and that is that I have not recovered my martial arts. For the time being, I can still suppress them, but in the long run, I will definitely be exposed. So you want to recover your martial arts as soon as possible? Can I? Tang Jing muttered to himself for a moment, then said, On the way here, I have already thought of a method. However, whether or not it will succeed, I am still unable to make a conclusion. However, it is still worth a try. That's great! Li Xiaotian was so excited that she almost jumped into Tang Deng's embrace. However, seeing that Marshall had been eyeing him covetously, she finally resisted this impulse. When do we start? Seeing her impatient appearance, Tang Jing laughed involuntarily and said, We won't be staying here for too long. Let's do it tonight. All right, after dark, I will secretly come here. I will not let anyone find out. Li Xiaotian's eyes lit up as she said. Hearing that the two of them were going to be together in the middle of the night, Marshall's nerves immediately tensed up. She fiercely glared at Tang Jing. Tang Jing could only bitterly smile. His heart did not have any messy thoughts. Li Xiaotian excitedly left. Since she wanted to subdue these people for her own use, she naturally had to quickly familiarize herself with everything here. Therefore, she did not want to waste any time. As soon as she left, the others all began to talk at once. Tang Jing, you really want to help her recover her martial arts and hand Li Palace over to her? Tian Chanzi was the first to ask. Tang Jing nodded his head. I feel that there is nothing wrong with this. Without Grandma Li Palace's threat to us will be greatly reduced. Even if Li Xiaotian does not succeed, it doesn't matter. Moreover, the disciples of Li Palace are all unstable factors. Since we cannot kill them all, it is best to restrict and manage them. The more Tang Jing thought about it, the more he felt that Li Xiaotian's suggestion was not bad and was very feasible. But what if she takes this power into her own hands and turns it against you? Lan Yu asked. Tang Jing thought for a while and resolutely shook his head. I don't think so. You may know a person for a long time without understanding their true nature. Moreover, did you notice that although she has lost her memories, many of the instincts hidden in her body still exist? For example, her ability to react on the spot is something that anyone can do. Lan Yu asked. That does not mean that she is a bad person, Tang Jing retorted. Lan Yu tried to persuade him. Yes, you can't. But perhaps it can also explain a problem. Who knows, one day she will return to her former self. Especially if she recovers her martial arts and controls Li Palace, her ambition will swell. People will change. Tian Chanzi nodded in agreement. I agree. Seeing the two of them standing on the same front, Tang Jing did not know whether to laugh or cry. But she really did save people. Just now, she even advised us to let the others live. Isn't that kind-hearted? Tian Chanzi said. Tang Jing, people's hearts are sinister. You must guard against them. Tang Jing muttered to himself for a while. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, he finally shook his head and said, Although what you said is reasonable, I feel that people should have the opportunity to correct their mistakes. As long as she has the intention. Of course, you can rest assured that if I find that she is showing signs of returning to her former self, I will personally extinguish those signs. Seeing that he had already made up his mind, the others did not try to persuade him any further. In the dead of night, many people had already gone to bed. Tang Jing stood alone in front of the window. Suddenly, there was a gentle knock on the door. He hurriedly opened it. Li Xiaotian quickly entered, deeply afraid that others would discover him. No one noticed anything unusual, right? Tang Jing asked. Li Xiaotian smiled and confidently said, Don't worry, I have made perfect preparations. Absolutely no one will notice. Moreover, no one will dare to follow me. Good, then let's begin. You sit cross-legged on the bed. Tang Jing pointed to the bed and said. Li Xiaotian obediently sat on the bed. Tang Jing sat face to face with her. He guided her to stretch out her hands and place them against each other. He could clearly feel the temperature of her palms. Her palms were a little wet, as if she was nervous. Tang Jing comforted her. Don't be nervous. I will guarantee your safety. Completely relax and listen to my instructions. Li Xiaotian smiled and said, I will listen to you. This smile was very charming, causing ripples in people's hearts. Tang Jing hurriedly restrained his mind and calmed his breathing. He urged his qi to slowly spread out from his palms. It entered her palms and flowed along her meridians into her body. The method he used was to use his qi to stimulate her inner strength. From there, it would resonate and allow her martial arts to automatically circulate. Her inner strength was stored in her body and was very calm. She had no way to mobilize it unless it was at a critical moment. For example, last time when she saved someone. Her body was like a mountain of treasures. It was just that the treasures within were not excavated. Tang Jing wanted to be the excavator. Step by step, he would guide and stimulate her inner strength to circulate. This would cause her martial arts to gradually reveal itself. This way, she would be able to regain what she had lost and master these martial arts. Li Xiaotian listened to Tang Deng's advice. Her body relaxed as she felt a warm flow of qi from her palms. It flowed along her arms' meridians into her body. Suddenly, she felt a piercing pain from her abdomen. She cried out in fear as her face twisted in pain. Don't be afraid. I am here. Tang Jing hurriedly comforted her. He had already felt something strange. When his qi flowed unimpeded into her dantian, he immediately felt a rebounding force attack his qi. This was the stimulation of her inner strength. It was an instinctive reaction. A martial artist's inner strength was also stored in their dantian. However, it would not be like a cultivator who cultivated a golden core. However, when the two forces fought in the body, the owner would suffer. She clenched her teeth and looked at Tang Jing. She said, I am fine. You can continue. Bear with it. If your inner strength has a reaction, your chances of success will be higher. Regarding her endurance, Tang Jing was not surprised at all. Chapter 949. Tang Jing incessantly circulated his true qi, which stimulated Li Xiaotian's inner strength bit by bit. Her inner strength resisted, slowly flowing along her meridians in an attempt to force the true qi out. Advancing and retreating affected every part of her body, every nerve. She grimaced in pain, continuously sucking in cold air, and her entire body was covered in sweat. Boom! Suddenly, her dantian was like a dam bursting. Her inner strength rushed out like a flood, violently surging towards her true qi. Tang Jing gave a knowing smile. It was not as difficult as he had imagined. Her true qi finally succeeded in stimulating her inner strength. This strand of true qi was too thin, it was not a match for the surging inner strength, so Tang Jing controlled his true qi and quickly withdrew. Immediately, the inner strength began to circulate on its own, circulating a small cycle in her body, and then slowly settling in her 8 extraordinary meridians. The pain on her face completely disappeared, replaced by an incomparably comfortable feeling. In addition, she felt that her entire body was filled with strength, as if she could kill a cow with a single punch. For eyes met, her bright eyes were filled with Tang Jing. She couldn't help but say, I feel like I'm filled with strength. Then get off the bed and try. Tang Jing encouraged. Li Xiaotian somersaulted in the air, jumping from the bed to the ground. She punched out, creating a burst of sound. Her leg swept out, creating a strong wind that swept across the chair leg, breaking it. Only then did she restrain herself, pleasantly surprised as she looked at her own hands and feet, as if she didn't recognize herself. At the same time, the martial arts returned to her mind like a tide. Each move, each set of techniques was incomparably clear, as if they were deeply engraved in her mind. How is it? Tang Jing asked with a smile. My martial arts have safely recovered. I feel very powerful, as if I'm number 1 in the world. Tang Jing couldn't help but laugh. Number 1 in the world is still far away, but it's enough to deal with the disciples of Li Palace. That's good, Tang Jing, thank you. Her eyes lit up as she looked at Tang Jing. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly. She was full of charm. Tang Jing's head moved. He seemed to feel that her every move was much more charming than before. In the dead of night, there seemed to be some complicated emotions brewing between the two of them. Suddenly, a fragrant wind blew in his face, and Tang Jing felt that there was another person in his arms. She was sweating profusely, and her clothes were already drenched. Her thin clothes seemed as if she wasn't wearing them at all, and they clung tightly to Tang Jing's body. Their elasticity was quite great, causing ripples in one's heart. Tang Jing suddenly remembered that she was someone who had practiced the art of seduction. Before she had practiced martial arts, she had also restrained her art of seduction. Now that she had recovered her martial arts, her charm technique was naturally revealed, which was why he felt that her charm had increased by a lot. With such a soft jade in his arms, Tang Jing couldn't help but feel restless. However, he still firmly pushed her out of his arms without leaving a trace. He said, "This is what I should do." Li Xiaotian didn't show the slightest difference. She faintly smiled and said, "Since I have already recovered my martial arts, I don't plan on going to the Northwest Desert with you. I want to take advantage of this time to reorganize the Li Palace and take them under your command." "So anxious?" Tang Jing was surprised. Li Xiaotian nodded. "This kind of matter shouldn't be delayed. Will you be fine by yourself?" Li Xiaotian was full of confidence. "My conclusion is that I have a lot of prestige in the Li Palace. In addition, my martial arts have also completely recovered. The others are not my opponent. Even if there are some people who find the slightest clue and want to resist, as long as I rope in the majority of people, these people will be like small raindrops falling into the ocean, unable to make a big wave. All right, since it's like this, then we will leave tomorrow. You be careful, go back and rest first." Seeing that he had ordered him to leave, Li Xiaotian did not stay any longer and left. Dong dong! Another series of knocks sounded. Tang Jing was confused. Could it be that Li Xiaotian had returned? Was there something else? Creak! He opened the door and saw Wu Qiao standing at the door, staring at him resentfully. "Why are you here? Do you think I've disturbed the two of you?" Marshall's jealousy was not small. Tang Jing laughed involuntarily. "What's the matter? I only helped her successfully recover her martial arts. Nothing happened." "Humph, if something really happened, I wouldn't be standing here talking to you." "Then what will you do?" Tang Jing asked curiously. Marshall thought for a moment. "I will go find Li Xiaotian to settle the score. Since she dared to seduce you, I will not let her go." Seeing her jealous look, Tang Jing couldn't help but laugh. "No one is seducing me. I only see you now." "I won't seduce you." "Is that so? But why does my soul fly away when I see you?" Tang Jing said with a mischievous smile. He pulled her into his embrace and closed the door. Without giving her any chance to refuse, he directly sealed her mouth. She struggled for a moment, then completely fell into his fiery passion. During the day, the two of them had been rubbing their heads together, kissing and kissing each other. At this moment, in the dead of night, a single man and a single woman were in the same room. Everything that happened next was a matter of course. The next day, the sun rose high in the sky, and the sunlight shone in through the gap in the window, shining on the two naked people on the bed. Their arms and legs were intertwined, and they were bathed in the mottled sunlight, which added a bit of temptation. The two of them opened their eyes in a daze and looked at each other. The corners of their mouths revealed a knowing smile at the same time. Marshall lightly punched his chest and said coquettishly, "Last night you were the one who refused to let me go. If I go out now, others will definitely see me. How do you want me to face others?" When Tang Jing's hands started to become unruly, Marshall was too lazy to resist and allowed him to do whatever he wanted. Last night she had almost turned into a pile of mud. In the end, she was at his mercy and unlocked several embarrassing postures. In any case, they all know about our relationship, and it's not like it's something shameful, so there's no need to hide from them. Moreover, your master and mistress should really want to see us together," Tang Jing advised. "Humph, do you think everyone's face is as thick as yours?" Marshall rolled his eyes and said with a flash of inspiration, "Fine, it's good to let them see so that some people don't have any ideas about you." The two of them were well aware of who these people were referring to. Tang Jing shook his head and smiled bitterly, saying, "I really don't have the slightest relationship with Li Xiaotian, so don't be jealous. Otherwise, I wouldn't mind doing some morning exercise this early in the morning." Seeing the evil smile on his face, Marshall hurriedly begged for mercy. The two of them put on their clothes and went out together. The others had long since woken up and looked at the two of them, smiling meaningfully. Marshall wished she could find a hole to hide in. Even if she was facing a fierce enemy, she would not be so timid. She really wanted to hide behind Tang Jing, but was held tightly by Tang Jing, so she could not hide at all. She glared fiercely at Tang Jing, but he turned a blind eye to it, making her so angry that she clenched her teeth. He directly led Marshall to the few of them and greeted them with a normal expression. Everyone woke up quite early. Tian Chanzi pointed to the sun in the sky and said, "Is it still early? The sun is already shining on our buttocks. I think some people were too tired last night, so they couldn't get up." Tang Jing said seriously, "I've been running to so many places in the past few days. I've been fighting continuously. It's indeed very tiring." Seeing him speak nonsense in such a serious manner, Tian Chanzi was defeated and gave him a thumbs up, saying that he was strong. Empyrean Fairy did not participate in the two's banter and directly asked, "What was the result of last night?" "Success." Tang Jing's smile disappeared as he said seriously. Lan Yu's face stiffened. She did not think that they would actually succeed. Not only was Li Xiaotian intelligent and resourceful, but she also had a high level of martial arts. She was like a tiger that had grown wings. If she really had any thoughts about Tang Jing, then it would be even harder to guard against her. She frowned and looked at Tang Jing with worry, as if he would be snatched away at any moment. Empyrean Fairy was not surprised because this was in line with her predictions. She said, "Then there is no need for us to stay here." Wu Junshan also nodded. "Yes, in order to avoid any problems, we should immediately leave." Tang Jing nodded. "I've already discussed it with her. We will leave today and she will stay." "What, she will stay?" The others were shocked. "What will she stay for?" "She wants to strike while the iron is hot and take over this place. She wants to take over these people and use them for herself." Tang Jing revealed Li Xiaotian's plan. Lan Yu muttered, "Her ambition is not small, to be so impatient. Madame Wu is too kind. Time waits for no one, so of course I have to hurry. I hope that when you return in triumph, everything here will be under control. At that time, you will be able to add a new force to Tang Jing's strength. Wouldn't that be wonderful?" Li Xiaotian heard Lan Yu's words and walked over from afar. "Are you really that confident?" Lan Yu asked skeptically. Li Xiaotian smiled faintly. "When you return in triumph, won't everything be clear?" Sensing that there was a bit of gunpowder between the two, Tang Jing hurriedly interjected. "Since she is so confident, then we will do as she says. However, staying here is also very dangerous, so you should be careful." Li Xiaotian smiled charmingly, not forgetting to remind him with concern. "You should be the one to be careful. We don't know what dangers there will be." Tang Jing hurriedly looked away and did not meet her gaze. He calmly said, "Then we will leave first. If the others ask, do you have a way to deal with them? Don't worry, I will handle everything. This matter should not be delayed, then we will leave immediately." Tang Jing decided. He did not eat breakfast and directly prepared to leave. Sure enough, before they had even walked a short distance, someone jumped out and stopped them. "Holy Maiden, why did these people come and then leave?" Li Xiaotian's face was as cold as frost. She coldly stared at the other person and said, "This is a secret of the Li Palace. Do I have to report to you what the palace master ordered?" Her cold eyes stared straight at the other person. The other person was the one who had questioned Li Xiaotian yesterday. Chapter 950. This woman was called Yu and was also Granny Li's personal disciple. Li Xiaotian coldly looked at Yu and asked, "You stop them. What do you want?" Yu's charm was only slightly inferior to Li Xiaotian's, but she was still publicly acknowledged as a great beauty. She raised her head to Li Xiaotian and said, "You've changed a lot since your return, as if you've become a different person. I have reason to suspect that you've already betrayed the Li Palace." Her insight was unique, hitting the nail on the head. When the others heard this, they began to whisper to each other. Li Xiaotian did not panic in the slightest, nor did he become angry. On the contrary, his lips curled into a sneer. Although she had never known Yu before, after yesterday's inquiries, she had gained a general understanding of the Li Palace without leaving a trace. She had the most thorough understanding of Yu because she had long ago predicted that she would make a move, but she had not expected it to be so soon. "Yu, don't you find this accusation laughable? I am the holy maiden of the Li Palace, so how could I betray the Li Palace?" Li Xiaotian retorted. Although Yu also felt that her suspicion was somewhat absurd, this was her intuition, and she had to speak it out. "The human heart is unfathomable. Even if you're the holy maiden, it's not impossible for you to betray." Yu refused to let go. "Ha ha, laughable. I see that you're the one who's betrayed the Li Palace, betrayed the Palace Master, and that's why you're trying to drive a wedge between us." Li Xiaotian struck later, but his words were aimed directly at Yu's weak point. The others all looked at her. After all, no one else had jumped out while she had blindly jumped out to accuse Yu. This was enough to make her credibility drop a few notches. Li Xiaotian very cleverly used this point to his advantage, so many of the spectators began to tilt the scales in their hearts. Yu thought to herself that this was bad. The holy maiden was resourceful and had a sharp tongue. Not only could she not gain any advantage with her words, she could also easily be dragged into a ditch. She hurriedly retorted, "I am loyal and devoted to the Li Palace and the Palace Master. I have no disloyalty. You're the one who is venomously slandering me." Li Xiaotian's eyes grew cold. "Since you have no disloyalty, why are you questioning the Palace Master's decision?" "I scram!" Li Xiaotian berated. Yu's face flushed red. Suddenly he raised his head and said, "I won't move. These people are enemies, and you lured them here, but you didn't do anything. I can't just turn a blind eye to this. They must stay and wait for the Palace Master to return. Then, everything will come to light. Then can you take responsibility for delaying the Palace Master's important matters?" Li Xiaotian pressed. A trace of panic flashed through Yu's eyes before she quickly regained her composure and said, "I will bear all the consequences. If Palace Master punishes me, I will not complain." She was making a bet this time because she really thought that everything was too strange, so she chose to follow her heart. Li Xiaotian's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. This person's determination was beyond his expectations. Facing such a strong pressure, she did not shrink back at all. "Do you think you can just say that you'll bear the consequences? How much weight can your shoulders bear?" Li Xiaotian asked jokingly. Yu's face was red. In fact, she felt a bit guilty. "In any case, I can't let them go. I am the holy maiden. Since the Palace Master is not here, you must listen to me. Do you want to go against your superiors?" I don't. If you don't, then move." "No!" The others couldn't stand it anymore. They knew that Li Xiaotian's anger was about to erupt. They quickly pulled Yu to persuade her. However, Yu was like a stubborn bull. Because this time she had offended Li Xiaotian, she decided to stake it all on one throw. "Holy maiden, if you have the guts, then let them stay and wait for the Palace Master to return. What qualifications do you have to negotiate with me?" Li Xiaotian stepped forward and glared at Yu. Yu's martial arts were not as good as Li Xiaotian's. Being suppressed by her aura, her heart raced, but she did not retreat. "If you want to let them go, then you have to step over my body. Is that so?" Li Xiaotian smiled faintly. Yu panicked. She suddenly had a bad premonition. Sure enough, Li Xiaotian glanced at the other disciples of the Li Palace and scolded. What are you standing there for? Disobeying the holy maiden's orders, have you forgotten the punishment? They were shocked, as if they were facing a great enemy. They replied with a yes, and then surrounded Yu. What are you doing? Yu, you disobeyed the holy maiden's orders and went against your superiors. This is a betrayal of the Li Palace. Hurry up and surrender, otherwise we won't care about our friendship, they loudly said. When the other people that Yu had secretly tried to win over saw this scene, they all chose to remain silent, not daring to help her. It was just that the holy maiden's reputation and prestige were too great, so they had no choice but to shrink back. When Tang Jing and the others saw this scene, they couldn't help but look at Li Xiaotian in a new light. Although she had lost her memories, her methods were not bad at all. She had actually taken the initiative so quickly and made an example out of them. With Yu as a precedent, even if the others had any ideas, they would be quickly snuffed out. At this time, Tang Jing somewhat believed in Li Xiaotian's plan. Lan Yu's eyebrows furrowed even tighter. Yu looked around at the crowd that was glaring at her like a tiger watching its prey. She flew into a rage. Li Xiaotian, you're distorting the truth. I'll fight you to the death. So, her martial arts were much higher than the average disciple of the Li Palace, so before the others could react, she leapt into the air, flying over their heads and pouncing towards Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian stood in her original position, not retreating a single step. Suddenly, she stretched out a hand and pointed at Yu's chest. Pung! In a moment of desperation, Yu's door was wide open, and there were too many flaws to be found. Li Xiaotian didn't waste any effort and quickly attacked her weak spot, defeating the enemy in one move, valiant and formidable. Yu staggered backwards, falling to the ground in a sorry state. The other Li Palace disciples hurriedly surrounded her and captured her. Li Xiaotian, I'm not done with you! Yu roared with a heart-wrenching voice. Li Xiaotian didn't even look at her, directly walking in front of Tang Jing and the others. She couldn't help but say, You guys leave first. Then this matter. Tang Jing glanced at Yu, whose eyes seemed like they were about to spit fire. Li Xiaotian faintly smiled, brimming with confidence. I can handle it, don't worry. Tang Jing was infected by her smile, nodding his head in understanding. Then you have to be careful, goodbye. After he finished speaking, he walked out of the valley with the others. The others looked back at Li Xiaotian from time to time, seeing that she had already walked in front of Yu. No one knew what she was talking about. When they had completely left the valley, Lan Yu curiously asked, How do you think Li Xiaotian will deal with that person? Li Xiaotian won't kill her, right? Marshall was also very curious. Everyone looked at Tang Jing, clearly wanting to hear his answer. He muttered to himself for a long time before saying, I think Li Xiaotian won't kill anyone. She is a kind person at the bottom of her heart. It's just a person. What's the difference between killing and not killing? Tian Chanzi shrugged, not finding it strange at all. If she kills, then it means that she is no different from the previous Li Palace holy maiden, and in the future, she will also become our enemy. Lan Yu said worriedly. Marshall's heart tightened as he subconsciously looked at Tang Jing. Tang Jing did not say a word as he continued to walk forward. Empyrean Fairy suddenly broke the silence and said, No matter what kind of thoughts she has, Tang Jing has already left her far behind, so she won't be able to cause any big waves. These words hit the nail on the head. No matter how powerful Li Xiaotian was, she still could not be compared to Tang Jing. Even if the worst result was that she recovered her memories, she would not become enemies with Tang Jing. Because she was a smart person, this kind of person was the best at judging the situation. In the past, she had no choice but to become enemies with Tang Jing. Now that she had a choice, why would she choose such a bumpy road? This was not Li Xiaotian's style. Tang Jing did not think so much. Other than his trust in Li Xiaotian, he had more confidence in the soul-searching technique. How could the memory loss caused by the soul-searching technique be so easy to remove? So he was not worried about Li Xiaotian recovering her memories. In short, the group left the Li Palace and set foot on the road to the northwest desert. Everyone retracted their thoughts, but when they thought about how Grandma Li had been in the northwest desert for so long, they felt a little uncertain. What kind of problem had caused her to pay so much attention to it? The desert was like a painting that slowly unfolded in front of everyone. Walking in the hot desert, if it was an ordinary person, they would have already been unable to hold on, but for them, this was just a piece of cake. Heat waves hit their faces and yellow sand filled the sky, but traces of spiritual energy were transmitted from the heat waves. Tang Jing, Tian Chanzi, and Empyrean Fairy were the most sensitive to spiritual energy, so they immediately discovered this point. They looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. Logically speaking, it was impossible for such an environment to have such abundant spiritual energy, so the only possibility was the Tree of Life. Tang Jing had walked through this area before, but at that time, there was no spiritual energy. It seemed that the Tree of Life had greatly transformed the environment of this world, so much so that even this almost barren desert was full of spiritual energy. The three of them could not help but feel happy. The more spiritual energy there was in the world, the more advantageous it was for cultivators like them. The other three were martial artists, so they were not so sensitive to spiritual energy. Seeing their reaction, they asked curiously. Tang Jing gave a simple introduction, and the corners of their mouths showed a bitter smile. If cultivators were strong, then it would be difficult to maintain the status of martial artists. However, when they saw Tang Jing, this idea was thrown to the back of their minds. As long as it was something beneficial to him, what did it matter if they suffered a little loss? Chapter 951. Hearing the Empyrean Fairy's words, everyone's attention was attracted. Especially Lan Yu, who could not wait to ask, "Is what you said true?" The Empyrean Fairy nodded gently. Lan Yu's eyes gradually lit up. It was naturally a happy thing to be recognized as a warrior. Tang Jing was also secretly surprised. In the past, he had always thought that warriors could not compare to cultivators because that was the reality. However, it seemed that he had also fallen into a misconception. Perhaps it was because of historical reasons that determined this wrong view, because cultivators had always been suppressing martial artists. If New Era had known this principle back then, he probably wouldn't have schemed to expel cultivators. Tang Jing had too many warriors around him. Since warriors had unlimited potential, it was naturally good news for him. The transformation of the world's spiritual energy does not have too serious an impact on warriors, so there's no need to worry. The Empyrean Fairy added. Everyone nodded happily. They continued to move forward. From afar, they saw the Tree of Life. The huge branches and green leaves covered the sky, as if a huge green umbrella stood between heaven and earth. Before everyone could exclaim in surprise, their eyes widened. That was because they had seen something out of the ordinary. The originally clear sky above the Tree of Life underwent a huge change. A faintly discernible black vortex actually appeared. "What's going on?" Tian Chanzi turned pale with fright. Tang Jing was also stunned. This was a situation that had never happened before. It exuded an unusual and strange aura. The Empyrean Fairy's expression was solemn. She hesitated for a moment and said, "This seems to be connected to another world." Tang Jing's head moved. The Tree of Life was absorbing the energy of the world of spirits and souls, so it was naturally connected to the world of spirits and souls. However, it was very secretive and was not as ostentatious as it was now. He stared at the black vortex in the sky without blinking. He suddenly had a flash of inspiration and said in surprise, "That looks like a ghost gate, but an enlarged version." An enlarged version of the ghost gate. Tian Chanzi and the Empyrean Fairy were shocked. They stared at it closely. The more they looked, the more similar it seemed. Both of them had seen the ghost gate before, so it was easy for them to come to a conclusion. The other three asked in confusion, "What's the ghost gate?" Although they were considered to be the strongest among the humans, they knew very little about these mysterious things. Tang Jing briefly introduced the Hellgate. The three of them turned pale with fright as they sucked in a breath of cold air and asked, "Then what's the problem?" The Empyrean Fairy and Tian Chanzi both looked at Tang Jing. The two of them more or less knew that Tang Jing had absorbed the energy of the ghost realm through the Tree of Life. The two of them could only sigh at their own inferiority in the face of such audacious behavior. Only a five-clawed golden dragon could come up with such a shocking method. There was only one explanation for all of this, and that was that it had something to do with Tang Deng's actions. Tang Jing racked his brains. "I used the 6 Directions 8 Wastelands formation to protect the Tree of Life and followed the instructions of the five-clawed golden dragon. Only then could I absorb the source energy of the ghost realm without anyone noticing. There shouldn't be any mistakes in all of this, so why is this strange scene happening?" He pondered for a long time and shook his head. "I can't figure out why this is happening for the time being." Everyone's expression darkened when they heard this. "Think about it carefully. If you don't figure it out, it'll be troublesome," the Empyrean Fairy encouraged. Tang Jing closed his eyes and began to search his brain like a computer. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration appeared in his mind. His eyes lit up as he slapped his forehead and said, "I know. What's going on? Last time, the leader of the dragon group, Xing Feng, destroyed the Tree of Life. Later, I didn't notice it because I didn't see any big problems. Now it seems that this strange scene was caused by the damage to the Tree of Life." Tell us in detail." Tian Chanzi and the Empyrean Fairy frowned and quickly asked. Tang Jing spoke tirelessly. Xing Feng's wild ambition was as clear as day, vivid in his mind. The others were shocked and said angrily, "So all of this was caused by Xing Feng? He even damaged the Tree of Life. His crime is unforgivable. He's already dead. It's useless to denounce him. Now we have to solve the urgent matter. Since this strange scene has appeared, I suspect that the Ghost Realm already knows about this. If the Ghost Realm knows that we're absorbing their source energy, I'm afraid that things will be troublesome," Tang Jing said worriedly. "If the Ghost Realm knew about this, they would definitely be furious. At that time, they would not only be facing a single person, but the hostility and threat of an entire world. Moreover, it would be from a great world." Thinking of this, Tang Jing could not help but feel a headache. He hoped that he was not a jinx and was not right. The 9 Heavens Profound Maiden and Heaven Monk also knew the seriousness of this matter, and they couldn't help but feel a deep sense of worry between their brows. "It's useless to think so much now. Let's go and see what's going on first." Tang Jing took a deep breath and suppressed the messy thoughts in his mind. Everyone nodded in agreement and rushed to the Tree of Life together. As they got closer and closer, the spiritual qi became denser and denser. Even Wu Junshan and the others could feel it. Their eyes showed surprise. Tang Jing took a deep breath and said, "If we cultivate here, it will definitely be twice the result with half the effort. Although this place is good, it's too big of a target. It will definitely attract the attention of all parties," Tian Chanzi said worriedly. Tang Jing smiled. "I'm just saying. Now that we have crystal stones, the spiritual qi is sufficient. There's no need to take such risks." Suddenly he stopped and gestured with his hand. "There's a situation." Everyone looked over. Sure enough, there were many people surrounding the Tree of Life. However, no one could get close to the Tree of Life. This was because every time they rushed to the Tree of Life, an invisible light curtain would light up in the void, bouncing them all away. However, they persevered, but it was all in vain. These people were actually familiar faces. At least, Tang Jing saw 2 familiar faces among them, Granny Li and fair-faced Flying Dragon. They were the ones who led a group of people to attack, but they were repeatedly thwarted and returned without success. "The Universal 8 Desolation formation is still in effect." Tang Jing was delighted. This group of people must have been attracted by the vortex in the sky. They'd been here for so long, who knows what progress they've made, Tian Chanzi said. "They might have also sensed the danger," Empyrean Fairy said. Wu Junshan suddenly interjected. "I know Granny Li's personality very well. She doesn't get up early without benefits. If there weren't any benefits, she definitely wouldn't have come here. I'm afraid they've also realized the importance of the Tree of Life, so they want to take it for themselves. Tang Jing thought for a moment and said noncommittally, in the past, the Tree of Life had always been under the Dragon Group's control. Others simply couldn't interfere or get a share of it. Once the Dragon Group was eliminated, the government's control over the Tree of Life instantly weakened, which gave Granny Lee the opportunity to take advantage of it. No matter what their goal is, we can't let them succeed. Since the Tree of Life is so important, it should be in our hands, Empyrean Fairy said without hesitation. The others also nodded. Tang Jing ignored the Tree of Life. The most important thing was that the Tree of Life was too mysterious. In a short time, he couldn't study it clearly. Moreover, he used the Universal 8 Desolation formation to protect it, so others couldn't get close. As they spoke, the group approached the Tree of Life. However, they swaggered around without any scruples, which immediately attracted the other party's attention. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. A few sounds of breaking air came from afar. In the blink of an eye, a few people blocked their path and shouted, "Stop! Who are you?" This shout immediately attracted everyone's attention. Granny Lee and Fair-Faced Flying Dragon looked at each other, unable to hide their surprise and vigilance. They seemed to be isolated from the world here. They didn't know what was happening outside, let alone that they would be found. Therefore, they were very surprised by the arrival of this group of people. The two separated from the crowd and walked to the front, vigilantly looking at the group. Granny Lee was the first to speak. "I really didn't expect to meet you here. Wu Junshan, Lan Yu, haven't you been hiding like cowards all this time? Why are you finally willing to show yourself?" Wu Junshan coldly snorted. "Granny Lee, that day in the martial sect, you joined hands with several elders to force me to abdicate. I haven't forgotten this matter at all. I must properly settle this debt with you." Regarding this matter, Wu Junshan couldn't let it go. Granny Lee said with a smile, "Wu Junshan, you didn't listen to the High Lord's orders. Moreover, you betrayed the old sect master back then, leaving behind Tang Jing, the root of the problem. Therefore, you only have yourself to blame for all of this." Lan Yu was furious. "My son is not the root of the problem. You people who tried to harm him are the root of the problem. I failed to protect my son back then. Now, even if I give up my life, I won't let anyone hurt him." Lan Yu's words were powerful and resonant, vividly displaying a mother's protective feelings for her son. Tang Jing's head warmed as he looked at her deeply, his eyes filled with tenderness. Lan Yu didn't notice as she stared straight at Granny Lee. Granny Lee sneered mockingly, declining to comment. "Granny Lee, Fair-Faced Flying Dragon, what are you doing here with so many people?" Tang Jing changed the topic. "Why should I tell you?" Granny Lee retorted. "It doesn't matter if you don't answer. In any case, you didn't succeed in your goal, right?" Tang Jing smiled. Granny Lee and Fair-Faced Flying Dragon's expressions changed slightly, but quickly returned to normal. Could it be that they knew the purpose of this trip? This time, they had indeed lost control of the Tree of Life due to the destruction of the Dragon Group. In addition, an unknown phenomenon had appeared above the Tree of Life. That was why the High Lord had sent them here to investigate, and do everything possible to take the Tree of Life for themselves. Seeing their reaction, Tang Jing's head moved. It seemed that his prediction was not far from the truth. This group of people really did come for the Tree of Life. Immediately, the vigilance in Tang Jing's heart became even stronger. Chapter 952. Although Granny Lee and Fair-Faced Flying Dragon didn't show the slightest sign of weakness on the surface, they were actually feeling a little weak in their hearts. This was because the other party's lineup was truly too luxurious. Moreover, the other party had already guessed their purpose, so they were even more uncertain about what the other party would do. Tang Jing didn't put these people in his eyes and instead looked up at the sky. The black vortex made him unconsciously frown as he lightly said, "I'll go take a look." Saying so, he walked towards the Tree of Life. Granny Lee shouted, Stop! And suddenly jumped in front of him, glaring like a tiger watching its prey as she said, Do you want to be the first to reach it? Tang Jing chuckled and jokingly said, You've been here for so long, have you made any progress? Can you break through this 6 directions 8 desolation formation? 6 directions 8 desolation formation? Granny Lee and fair-faced flying dragon glanced at each other. This was the first time they had heard of this formation, but they had already deeply experienced its power. Granny Lee was also quite knowledgeable about formations, but she was completely clueless about the 6 directions 8 desolation formation. Seeing the two speechless, Tang Jing laughed and said, How could the formation I laid down be so easy to break? Granny Lee's expression slightly changed. The appearance of this formation was very strange. She didn't know that it was the work of Tang Jing. Hearing this, she looked at Tang Jing with a complicated gaze. Why did you lay down this formation? Of course it's to guard against people like you who have bad intentions. Humph, this tree of life isn't yours, what qualifications do you have to say such things? Granny Lee questioned. Tang Jing laughed and said, Although the tree of life isn't mine, it was only able to grow because of me. Of course, other people don't have the qualifications to take it for themselves. Originally, when he fell into the large hole under the dragon group's base, he accidentally encountered the tree of life and caused it to sprout and take root, resulting in this towering tree. Granny Lee didn't know the details, so she naturally didn't believe him and retorted, Do you think we'll believe you just because of your mouth? I don't expect you to believe me. Oh, there's something you don't know, I forgot to tell you. What is it? Tang Jing looked at them playfully and said, The Azure Dragon Hall has already been destroyed by us. Your High Lord fled in a sorry state like a stray dog. What did you say? As soon as he said this, everyone on the other side turned pale with fright. One after another, they scolded. Nonsense! Our Lord is unparalleled in this world. How can you fight against him? Humph, if you want to use this method to scare us, your method is too clumsy. Tang Jing laughed out loud as he listened to their rebuttal. What are you laughing at? Could it be that you've been exposed by us, so you're trying to cover it up? He must be hiding something because of his guilty conscience. Tang Jing shook his head and said, You guys are really deceiving yourselves. Do I need to scare you? Do you think you're a match for us? He thought too highly of himself. Let me tell you, not only did your exalts escape, Elder Angler of the Two Reverends is already dead. As for Xianyin, I have already captured her alive. What? Fair-faced flying dragon screamed. Previously, he was still able to maintain his calm and question Tang Jing's words, but as soon as he heard Xianyin's name, his expression changed. It was like the sky during the dog days of June, dark and gloomy, mixed with panic. The others, including Granny Lee, had never heard of the name Xianyin, but fair-faced flying dragon had occasionally heard the High Lord mention it. This was the biggest secret of the Azure Dragon Hall, and it was impossible for outsiders to know about it. But Tang Jing said it so casually, so everything went without saying. His words were most likely true. But according to the High Lord, the Third Reverend, Xianyin, was an extremely powerful expert. Even the High Lord felt inferior, so how could she be captured alive? Fair-faced flying dragon was puzzled as he looked at Tang Jing with burning eyes. From fair-faced flying dragon's reaction, Tang Jing had already guessed a bit. He smiled meaningfully. It seems that you know more than Granny Lee. Granny Lee also noticed the clues and suspiciously looked at fair-faced flying dragon. She was very clear that fair-faced flying dragon knew more about the Azure Dragon Hall, so she quickly asked, What is going on? Fair-faced flying dragon's face turned from black to white. He moved his lips, but no words came out. But this reaction was enough to explain the problem. Granny Lee's face also became incomparably pale. Could it be that what he said is true? This is only about the Azure Dragon Hall. Granny Lee, I also have some big news about the Lee Palace. Do you want to hear it? Tang Jing asked with a smile. What did you do to the Lee Palace? The Lee Palace has already changed hands. Humph, you think that the disciples of the Lee Palace will submit to you? Wishful thinking. Moreover, it is impossible for you to know the location of the Li Palace, Granny Li said with disdain. Tang Jing shook his head. I won't tell you the details. I just want to let you know. He didn't want to bring up Li Xiaotian, so he didn't say anything else. But these words were like a heavy bomb thrown into the crowd, setting off stormy waves in their hearts. Not only did fair-faced Flying Dragon and Granny Li's faces change, but the others were also at a loss for words. Tang Jing faintly smiled. This move was enough to break the majority of their will, so the following matter would be much easier to handle. If you surrender, except for the leader, I can let the rest of you live. After this village, there won't be another opportunity, Tang Jing advised. Don't believe him, Fair-faced Flying Dragon suddenly shouted. We will live and die together. We can definitely defeat them. Granny Li's eyes flickered, but she didn't forget to shout. Right, everyone, let's fight to the death. Tang Jing shook his head. I gave you a chance to live, but you chose to seek your own deaths. You can't blame me for this. Wu Junshan and the rest were already ready to make a move. Hearing Tang Jing's order, all of them rushed towards the enemy. Wu Junshan firmly locked onto Granny Li. His figure flashed in front of her, and he launched a fierce attack on her. Seeing this, Granny Li shouted, Wu Junshan, I didn't kill you that day. Today, you will die without a doubt. Whoosh! She waved the crutch in her hand and a strong wind swept toward Wu Junshan. Wu Junshan drew circles with his hands, and the continuous power of yin-yang harmony gushed out from the circles. The crutch was pushed aside, and the attack missed. However, Granny Li's wrist shook, and the attack of the crutch suddenly changed. It drew a shadow and hit Wu Junshan's head. This change of move was so fast and strange that it was completely unexpected. After all, she was a first-grade martial king, one level higher than Wu Junshan's 9th-grade supreme power realm, so she was more skillful. Seeing this, Wu Junshan's hair stood on end. He was shocked. He lowered his body and raised his hands, drawing 9 circles at once. This was the highest level of yin-yang harmony. He had mastered it, and in an instant, the explosive power increased exponentially. Bang! He caught the crutch with his bare hands. The huge force made the bones in his arms creak. Yin-yang harmony was best at using softness to overcome the strong, so he was not overwhelmed by the power of the crutch. Wu Junshan's face flushed red. He gritted his teeth and returned to normal. He turned his palms and slapped toward Granny Li's head. Granny Li snorted disdainfully. She swept her crutch, and a shadow of the crutch appeared in front of Wu Junshan. It was extremely dangerous. I'll also fight you, Granny Li! Lan Yu's voice came, and a graceful figure appeared in front of Granny Li in a flash. She pointed a finger, and a brilliant power burst out from her fingertip. Lan Yu had once pointed a finger at a mecha, but that mecha could not withstand the power of her finger. One could imagine how terrifying the power of her finger was. Granny Li knew how powerful Lan Yu was, so she shouted, Lan Yu, your yang-breaking finger is fierce and overbearing, but it will be very difficult for you to defeat me. Lan Yu was unmoved, and said coldly, I can't defeat you alone, but we are husband and wife, and we can cut through metal. As soon as she finished speaking, she pointed a finger at the shadow of the crutch. A terrifying power tore through the shadow of the crutch, and with a poof, the shadow was broken. However, the power of this finger was not used up, and it pointed at the crutch. Bang! The power of this finger was so terrifying that the crutch trembled, and Granny Li flew back a few steps before she could stabilize herself. Granny Li's face turned ugly, and she said, You really live up to your reputation. One finger can break yin and yang, and it's even more powerful than Wu Junshan's yin-yang harmony. Lan Yu snorted and said, You were also involved in almost killing my son. Today, we will settle this once and for all. Lan Yu was like a maddened lioness. With a low roar, she charged forward again. Wu Junshan was not idle either. The two were husband and wife, and many times their thoughts were connected. They could understand each other's thoughts with just a faint look, and they cooperated well. The power of the two's combined attacks was greatly increased. This was not just the superposition of their individual strengths, but also more than the sum of their strengths. Thus, Granny Lee's eyes flashed with surprise, and she no longer dared to underestimate them. "Then I will send you husband and wife on your way today." Granny Lee was full of confidence, and launched a storm of attacks. The husband and wife were not afraid at all, and counterattacked. Fair-faced Flying Dragon knew how powerful the Empyrean Fairy was, so when he learned of the situation in the Azure Dragon Hall, although he appeared calm on the surface, he was already feeling scared. Seeing the others attack, he dodged, trying to avoid a head-on confrontation with the Empyrean Fairy. Just as he dodged the Fairy of the Nine Heavens, he saw a long sword that was shining with cold light coming towards him. He was shocked and leaped back in the air, but he didn't manage to dodge the sword completely. There was a wound on his body, and blood flowed out. He had just started, and he was already injured, which made him feel embarrassed and scared. Looking carefully, he realized that the one who attacked him was Tian Chanzi. Although he was also a martial king, he knew that there was a big gap between him and Tian Chanzi. Now, with a pincer attack, he had nowhere to run. With a roar, he slashed out with his sword. The Tia's sword! The Empyrean Fairy's eyes turned cold, and said, "It is a waste for the first Emperor Qin's Tia's sword to fall into your hands. Last time you escaped, but this time, don't even think about escaping." She was very familiar with the Tia's sword, and knew how powerful it was. It was a waste for Fair-faced Flying Dragon to have such a divine tool. Chapter 953. Fair-faced Flying Dragon's face turned serious as he watched the two masters attacking him from the front and back. With a flick of his wrist, sword flowers bloomed in the air. Preemptive strike. He decided to use Tian Chanzi as a breakthrough point. Obviously, Tian Chanzi was slightly inferior to the Empyrean Fairy. Tian Chanzi saw the dazzling sword light piercing towards him, and the sword in his hand moved. His sword was a heaven-grade magic treasure, and could not be compared to the Tia's sword, but he had the advantage of having more profound skills. Thus, in the midst of the sword light, there were sounds of clashing and sparks flying in all directions. Tian Chanzi's otherworldly flying fairy was complex and ever-changing. It could be graceful or heavy, but it could be mastered, and its power was peerless. Fair-faced Flying Dragon's sword moves were particular about the word strange. Strange moves came out one after another to resolve the most dangerous situation, which was unexpected. The two's sword moves were exquisite and peerless. In the blink of an eye, they had exchanged more than 10 moves. Tian Chanzi became more and more courageous, while Fair-faced Flying Dragon was retreating as he fought. He felt a huge pressure. He gradually understood that although he did not underestimate his opponent, he still underestimated Tian Chanzi. He was also a sword master, but in the face of Tian Chanzi's sword moves, he could only defend. Occasionally, he would counterattack, but it was easily resolved by Tian Chanzi. He knew that things were not looking good. This time, he was doomed. He retreated a few more steps, but heard a gust of wind behind him. He subconsciously turned back, but the Tia's sword had already stabbed back. The Tia's sword stabbed into the air, and a palm imprinted on his body. Bang! A huge force burst out, and he flew backwards, spitting out a mouthful of blood. Before he landed, he saw Tian Chanzi leaping into the air, the sword light in his hand blossoming, and slashing towards him. Fair-faced Flying Dragon ignored the raging waves and immense pain in his body, and raised the Tia's sword with difficulty. Clang! The Tia's sword flew out of his hand. Puff! Blood spurted out from his chest as a huge sword wound appeared on his chest. Fortunately, at the critical moment, he forcibly twisted his body and moved back a few inches, so the sword didn't cut him in half. But there was no doubt that he was heavily injured. He fell heavily to the ground, splashing blood all over the ground, and his eyes instantly became dispirited. Tian Chanzi reacted quickly and caught up with Tai Jian in a flash. A look of joy appeared on his face. The Empyrean fairy glanced at him indifferently. She didn't fight for it. She didn't use a sword, so it was useless even if she had the Taya sword. Tian Chenzi gently stroked the Taya sword as if he was caressing his beloved woman. His eyes burned with a blazing light as he muttered to himself. The Taya sword is indeed extraordinary. Shwa! He waved the Taya sword, bringing out a biting cold sword chi. He was overjoyed and quickly cut a wound on his palm. His blood dyed the Taya sword red. At the same time, he muttered some words. Although the Taya sword fell into the hands of fair-faced flying dragon, he was a martial artist and didn't know the method to bind it with blood. So, strictly speaking, he couldn't be considered the Taya sword's owner. As for its previous owner, Qin Shi Huang, he was already dead. The contract between them had long since expired, making it an ownerless item. Tian Chenzi was very clear on this point, so he couldn't wait to bind it with blood. Saint weapons were hard to come by, so he couldn't miss this opportunity. When the incantation was finished, the Taya sword immediately released the red light. It quickly converged and disappeared along with the blood. "Ha! Success!" Tian Chenzi laughed loudly. Fair-faced flying dragon staggered to his feet, clutching his chest. He looked at this scene with a pale face and shouted, "What did you do to my Taya sword?" Tian Chenzi waved the Taya sword, bringing out an even stronger sword chi. He coldly looked at fair-faced flying dragon and said, "Who said the Taya sword was yours? You took the Taya sword from Qin Shi Huang's hands, but you only used a little of it. The essence of the Taya sword was not used at all. It was simply a waste. Now that it is with me, it can display its true power." The Taya sword also had a sword spirit. Hearing these words, it seemed to be encouraged. It buzzed and trembled, as if it was praising him. Fair-faced flying dragon saw this scene, and his face became even paler. Although he didn't want to admit it, it was the truth. He really didn't become the true owner of the Taya sword. Immediately, his face revealed a bleak and self-deprecating smile. At the same time, the other people's battle became more and more intense. Wu bravely advanced and began to fight with several Li Palace disciples. Her martial arts were much higher than theirs. Although she was alone, she didn't fall into a disadvantage. The Inferno Divine Palm's power was unparalleled. With a few palm strikes, she sent several people flying, causing others to shrink back. However, the addition of another group of people caused Marshall to feel great pressure. These people were all master-level warriors because they were flying guillotines. Tang Jing had already noticed this group of flying guillotines. Their attire was too special, and he could recognize them at a glance. Seeing that they were attacking Marshall, how could Tang Jing just sit back and watch? The war spirit sword directly slashed at one of the flying guillotines. With a poochie sound, the flying guillotine was torn into pieces. The war spirit sword lightly touched another person's throat. Pooh! A small red dot appeared. The power condensed at her fingertips was terrifying. Granny Lee turned pale with fright, but there was no way out. She could only wave her walking stick and hit Wu Junshin's chest. Pun! There was a muffled sound like thunder, but before she could use all her strength, her back was hit by a finger. Yang breaking finger, one finger to break yin and yang. Pooh! Blood spurted out from Granny Lee's back. The corner of her mouth twitched violently. She staggered and fell to the ground. Wu Junshan was on the verge of collapse. Lan Yu hurriedly supported him and asked, "How are you?" Wu Junshan's throat moved, and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. He was on the verge of death. He said with difficulty, "Don't let Granny Lee go." Lan Yu understood the meaning in her husband's eyes. She nodded and said, "Rest well. I'll take care of her." Whoosh! As soon as she turned around, she rushed towards Granny Lee. Granny Lee's injuries were not lighter than Wu Junshan's, but her cultivation was deeper, so she did not completely collapse. She wiped the blood from her mouth and fiercely pressed on her chest a few times to stop the bleeding. Her face was pale as she muttered to herself, They didn't hesitate to hurt each other. They're crazy. She did not know how much the couple hated the accomplice who hurt their son. With their cultivation, they could not take revenge on the High Lord. Now that they met Granny Lee, they would naturally seek justice at all costs. Seeing Lan Yu rushing over without any regard for her own safety, Granny Lee's eyes flashed with panic. She did not care about her injuries and hurriedly retreated. "Granny Lee, don't even think about escaping!" Lan Yu roared. The others also saw this scene. Fair-faced Flying Dragon turned pale with fright. Not only did he watch Taya fall into Tian Chanzi's hands, but even his most powerful accomplice, Granny Lee, was seriously injured and unable to protect herself. Were they going to be wiped out this time? He did not have time to think because Tian Chanzi walked towards him step by step with Taya. He hurriedly retreated and shouted, "You want to kill me?" Tian Chanzi said with a smile. "Elder Angler is already dead. Since you are also one of the Azure Dragon Hall's consecrators, you should accompany him and keep him company." Fair-faced Flying Dragon's expression kept changing. The arrogant him never thought that he would end up like this. He was unwilling and angry. He fiercely glared at Tian Chanzi and said, "Don't be happy too early. Back then, the Azure Dragon Hall's first High Lord was able to expel you cultivators from this world. Our current High Lord can do the same. Even if I die, you won't have an easy time. Are you trying to scare me? I, Tian Chanzi, am not afraid of anything. Why would I be scared by someone who is about to die? Now I'll send you on your way." Tian Chanzi roared. Taya burst out with a dazzling light. With a whoosh, it flew out of his hand. The sword flashed and pierced through Fair-faced Flying Dragon's chest. Boom! Fair-faced Flying Dragon stared blankly at his chest. His eyes quickly lost their vitality, and he fell to the ground. Chapter 954. Fair-faced Flying Dragon's life was taken away by the Taya sword. The sound of his body hitting the ground was like a clap of thunder that exploded in Granny Lee's heart. It was as if she could see her own death. She raised her walking stick and fought back with great difficulty. Lan Yu fought bravely. Boom! Suddenly, there was a clap of thunder in the sky. A black bolt of lightning fell from the black vortex and struck the Tree of Life. Hua! A ray of light rose from the Tree of Life and clashed with the black lightning, exploding into a myriad of dazzling lights. This change was out of everyone's expectations. Even Granny Lee was stunned. They had been here for so long and had only seen the vortex in the sky become darker and darker. There were no other changes, let alone the black lightning. Could lightning be black? She had never heard of or seen anything like this before. The others subconsciously stopped fighting and raised their heads to look at this inconceivable scene. Tang Jing shivered and shouted, "Not good!" He took the lead and rushed towards the Tree of Life. He quickly activated the Universal 8 Desolation Array and rushed into the invisible protective barrier. Empyrean Fairy and Tian Chanzi were also attracted by this scene and quickly followed. Lan Yu, Wu Junshan, and Marshall's expressions all changed. Seeing the three of them as if they were facing a great enemy, they knew that something must have gone wrong. Lan Yu was absent-minded, but Granny Lee quickly seized the opportunity. Her walking stick tapped on the ground and with the help of the huge rebound, she flew into the distance like an arrow. When Lan Yu reacted, Granny Lee had already fled far away. She hatefully stomped her foot. "I'll chase after her. Marshall, take care of your master." Wu Junshan immediately supported Wu Junshan. The rest of the defeated soldiers did not have the heart to continue fighting, although many of them had higher cultivations than Wu Junshan. No one dared to attack the two of them. Instead, they quickly fled into the distance, not even daring to look back. Marshall did not have the energy to deal with these people. She worriedly looked at the vortex in the sky. Wu Junshan coughed and weakly said, "Let's go in as well." Marshall supported Wu Junshan as they walked step by step into the 6 Directions 8 Desolation Array. Admiring the majesty of the Tree of Life at close range, one could not help but sigh at its miraculous nature. Wu Junshan took a deep breath and felt the air enter his lungs through his trachea. The pain from his wound actually lessened slightly. He said in surprise, "This air is too magical. Perhaps this is the effect of the spiritual energy that they were talking about." That was indeed the case. The spirit qi was dense enough. Even if an ordinary person inhaled it, it would be greatly beneficial to their body. The tree of life continuously released spirit qi. The spirit qi here had reached an extremely high level. That was why Wu Junshan had such a feeling. Tang Jing had already rushed to the bottom of the tree of life. With a tap of his toes, he climbed up the trunk and rushed to the top of the tree as if he was walking on flat ground. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the dense foliage. Empyrean Fairy and Tian Chanzi were a little slower, but they followed without any hesitation. Wu Junshan was injured and was unable to withstand such a jolt. He could only wait anxiously under the tree with Wu. Whiz! Tang Jing brushed past the dense foliage and soared up. Suddenly, his eyes lit up as he reached the top. He soared up from the foliage and landed on the treetop. Looking up, the black vortex in the sky seemed to be within reach. Observing the vortex at close range, he immediately felt a soul-stirring yin qi being emitted from the vortex, enveloping the sky. If not for the 6 directions 8 desolation array protecting the tree of life, this yin qi would have directly corroded the tree of life. It really is the ghost realm, Tang Jing muttered to himself. Boom! Suddenly, another clap of thunder exploded in the vortex. Then, another bolt of lightning descended, ruthlessly striking the invisible light barrier. Immediately, ripples of light rippled out. The ripples of light quickly spread out in all directions. Not long after, it covered the entire light barrier. The originally invisible light barrier immediately appeared. Boom! Immediately after, another black bolt of lightning, 3 black bolts of lightning descended from the sky and landed on the light barrier. Immediately, the light barrier began to tremble violently. In the end, with a kacha sound, the light barrier actually shattered into pieces, turning into specks of light that scattered in all directions. The 6 directions 8 desolation array was broken. Tang Jing stared blankly at this scene. Originally, he was extremely confident in the 6 directions 8 desolation array. After all, this was an extremely powerful array, and with the activation of the Heaven and Earth Profound Stone, it should be impregnable and unbreakable. Once the 6 directions 8 desolation array was broken, Tang Jing knew that something was wrong. If the powerful black lightning landed on the tree of life, it would definitely harm it. His worries were immediately fulfilled. Another loud sound came from the sky, and then a thick black lightning bolt descended, directly striking towards the tree of life. Tang Jing roared. He stepped forward and waved the War Soul sword in his hand, soaring into the sky like a slowly rising red sun. The sword light that erupted from the War Soul sword completely enveloped Tang Jing, and the man and sword became one, going against the flow. Boom! The lightning fell on Tang Jing's body, and the thick lightning turned into small lightning bolts. It was like a giant python that had hatched many young snakes. They slithered around and entangled Tang Jing. His sword had indeed scattered the lightning, but it did not destroy it. Instead, it caused the lightning to turn from a whole to 0 and become omnipresent. Ah! He let out a heart-wrenching cry, mixed with pain, because those lightning bolts were actually trying to drill into his skin. These lightning bolts all contained extremely strange power. If they were allowed to enter the body, it would definitely be harmful to the person. Therefore, he activated his true qi and the holy armor shield. With a sword in one hand and a shield in the other, he resisted the strange black lightning. Pa pa pa! The electric current continued to flow through his body. Tang Jing's entire body trembled, but he still gritted his teeth and forcefully activated his true qi, as if he was trying to force the lightning back. However, these lightning bolts were extremely strange and powerful. The true qi was actually unable to force them back. They seemed to be able to break through Tang Jing's defense and invade his body. Suddenly, Tang Jing saw the whirlpool in the sky from the corner of his eyes. It seemed to be brewing lightning again. He shouted, "Crap!" The lightning in front of him had not been dealt with yet, and now there was another bolt of lightning. Wasn't this trying to kill him? Boom! As expected, after a loud sound, the lightning descended. It was as if it wanted to turn him into a piece of charcoal. "If you want to kill me, I'll fight you to the death!" Tang Jing roared and gave up on the holy armor shield. In any case, it would not be able to block this strange lightning. He stretched out his hand and directly grabbed at the lightning. However, he did not completely lose his mind, nor was he seeking death. Instead, he had an idea and activated the sky-swallowing technique. The sky-swallowing technique could devour everything. He wondered if it would work on this black lightning. A black hole appeared in his palm. His hand was like an antenna, firmly attracting the lightning's attention. All the lightning bolts struck his hand at once. The scene of Tang Jing being turned into charcoal was not what he had imagined. He was safe and sound. He raised his hand as if he was a hero who had sacrificed himself for justice. He was stunned for a moment, and stared blankly at his intact hand. Joy gradually spread in the depths of his eyes. He was so surprised that he almost jumped up and cheered. "Haha, lightning, aren't you very powerful? Come on, I'm not afraid of you anymore." Seeing that the lightning on his body was still running around, Tang Jing hurriedly aimed his palm at those small lightning bolts. It was like a huge vacuum cleaner, and these lightning bolts were like dust. In the blink of an eye, they were sucked in and disappeared. He relaxed and looked up at the sky. He pointed at the black whirlpool and shouted, "Come on, I'll teach you a lesson." Chapter 955. Looking at the black lightning in the sky, the Empyrean fairy asked worriedly, "Are you sure you can deal with it? Tang Jing, don't try to be brave. This isn't a game. It's a matter of life and death." Tian Chanzi also reminded him. Tang Jing wasn't completely sure, but he was willing to give it a try. After all, he had experienced the power of the sky-devouring technique, so he chose to take a gamble. "I'll give it a try." "All right, we'll be by your side. If anything goes wrong, we'll take action," Tian Chanzi said with a dignified expression. The Empyrean fairy didn't say a word, but it was obvious that she had the same plan. This was undoubtedly a huge gamble. If Tang Jing's judgment was wrong, and the lightning was too powerful, Tian Chanzi and the Empyrean fairy wouldn't be able to save him in time. Then, Tang Jing would be blasted into ashes by the lightning. He took a deep breath. His heart was in his throat, and he looked up at the sky. Rumble! With a deafening sound, the python-like lightning fell. Tang Jing raised his hands and silently used the sky-devouring technique. Immediately, 2 black holes appeared in his palms. He kept urging his power, and the black holes in his palms grew bigger and bigger. Suddenly, the air above his hands fluctuated violently, and circles of ripples appeared. The air gradually turned black, and finally turned into a huge black hole. At this moment, the lightning struck and fell into the black hole. Whoosh! The black hole flashed, and the lightning disappeared. It was as if it had never appeared, and there was no trace of it. Tang Jing stared blankly at this scene. Just now, he had desperately urged the sky-devouring technique. He had a feeling that the sky-devouring technique was showing signs of a breakthrough. His sky-devouring technique had been stuck at the 2nd level of absorption. Now that it showed signs of breaking through to the 3rd level of soul-devouring, how could he not be surprised? "The sky-devouring technique is really extraordinary. It's amazing!" Tang Jing couldn't help but praise. The Empyrean fairy and Tian Chanzi also looked at this scene in surprise. The sky-devouring technique was a little out of the ordinary, and they were completely surprised. At that moment, the two of them no longer dared to underestimate this set of spells. With a thought from Tang Jing, the huge black hole did not disappear. Instead, it faced the sky, as if it was mocking the lightning for overestimating itself. Roar! Another angry roar came from the vortex. The color of the vortex became darker and darker, and the black clouds rolled. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the black clouds. The black cloud continued to spread downwards like a flight of stairs descending from the sky and landing on top of everyone's heads. This was a ferocious ghost head. 2 balls of ghostly fire burned in its hollow eyes. It was blue and extremely terrifying. He was very tall, at least a few meters tall. He looked down at the 3 of them with an awe-inspiring aura. "What is this?" Tang Jing cried out in surprise. Back then, he had never seen such a behemoth in the ghost realm. "You humans are so bold. How dare you absorb the original energy of our ghost realm? We will destroy your human world." The ferocious ghost opened its mouth and roared angrily like thunder. The Empyrean fairy had been looking at this behemoth coldly. After listening to his words, she retorted, "Don't make the ghost realm sound so righteous. Back then, the human world was a big world, and your ghost realm was just a small world attached to the human world. Now your ghost realm has become a big world, and the human world has become a small world. Isn't it obvious enough?" Tang Jing had never thought of this problem, but it was indeed a fact. Tian Chanzi also nodded subconsciously. The transformation of the human world and the ghost realm had happened in the past few hundred years. It was impossible to say that the ghost realm did not do anything. Tian Chanzi muttered to himself and agreed. "That makes sense. So, all of this is what the ghost realm brought upon itself. We are just taking back what originally belonged to us." The ghost was stunned for a moment. It seemed that it did not expect that there would be people in the human world who could see so clearly. The flames in its eyes jumped up and down. Its empty eyes stared at the 3 of them and asked, "Who are you people? How do you know these things? If you don't want people to know, don't do it in the first place. Moreover, this is not a profound matter. You can get the answer with a little analysis," the Empyrean fairy said indifferently. "So what if you know? Now that you dare to do this, we will kill you and flatten the human world," the ghost said arrogantly. Tang Jing had been silent. When he heard this, he sneered. "Flatten the human world? What a big tone." The ghost's eyes turned and the flames in its pupils were aimed at Tang Jing. It said, "With your strength, you dare to challenge our ghost realm. You really don't know life from death. Is that so? Then I'll deal with you first." Tang Jing did not have a good impression of the ghost realm. Back then, he still lost a shooting sun arrow in the ghost realm. He had thought of going back to get it, but he never had the opportunity. Now that he met this rude ghost, he naturally started with it. Whoosh! The tip of his foot lightly tapped on the branch. The branch bent down and suddenly bounced back. He held War Soul and flew towards the ghost. He could not see through the ghost's real situation, so he decided to explore the path first. Whoosh! A heaven-flying immortal sword technique pierced towards the ghost. The ghost stood on the black cloud and roared. Its sharp claws like a beast slapped towards Tang Jing. Pun! The claws hit the War Soul, but there were no sparks. Only black gas splashed out from the claws, and a gap appeared. Then, it quickly repaired itself and returned to normal. Tang Deng's pupils constricted. He thought to himself that it could actually repair itself. This was similar to the ability of the Blood Clan. However, he did not stop there. He skillfully attacked with a few sharp sword moves. These moves were divided into top, bottom, left and right, respectively attacking different parts of the ghost. The ghost's body was huge, but its movements were very agile. Its claws were like weapons, perfectly receiving the attack of War Soul. Of course, the power of War Soul was not to be underestimated. It cut off a few of the ghost's fingers. When the fingers left his body, they immediately turned into a ball of black gas and transformed into a ferocious ghost head. It merged into his body and the fingers quickly grew out. Huh! Tang Jing was secretly shocked. What was going on? The Empyrean fairy silently watched the battle. When she saw the fingers transform into ghost head, her eyes lit up and shouted, "I finally understand. Tang Jing, This ghost is not a real body, but a condensation of countless ghosts. So, even if you cut it into 4 or 5 pieces, it can quickly reassemble and recover. Is it really like this? It's all condensed from ghosts? Tang Zheng was shocked. He stared at the ghost but did not find any clues. When the ghost heard this, the flames in its eyes jumped a few times. It was obvious that she had seen through its thoughts. It looked at the Empyrean fairy in shock. The flames in its eyes jumped, and its face was ferocious and unkind. Since the Empyrean fairy can see through it, then it must be right. It is condensed from ghosts. It will not be so easy to completely defeat it. Although he said this, Tang Jing did not retreat. Instead, he desperately urged the war soul. Suddenly, a light flashed in his mind. The third move of the Tai Chi Yin Yang sword technique appeared. He was overjoyed at the unexpected good news. Without even thinking, he used it in the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint. Tens of thousands of sword light burst out from the war soul. In an instant, the ghost was torn into pieces by the sword light, turning into pieces. However, when the sword light disappeared, the pieces immediately turned into black smoke. Then, they turned into ferocious ghost heads. They fused together at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not long after, the huge ferocious ghost appeared again. The three of them witnessed this scene with their own eyes. They were amazed. This was simply an undying monster. How could they fight it? Tang Jing scratched his head. He was also very distressed. He turned to look at Tian Chanzi and the Empyrean fairy. The two of them nodded in tacit understanding and said, "We will help you." With the help of 2 experts, the situation of the battle changed in an instant. This ghost's strength was indeed very strong. Moreover, it became stronger when faced with a strong opponent. It turned out that when it fought with Tang Jing, it did not use its full strength. One could only see its hand grab the void. A black lightning immediately formed in its hand. The lightning crackled and the power was extraordinary. Just now, the lightning was actually controlled by it. In an instant, its 2 hands grabbed 2 lightning bolts. These 2 lightning bolts were like 2 whips, but they were even more powerful. They constantly flashed with black lightning and sizzled. Whoosh! The ghost waved the lightning whip. Wherever the lightning whip passed, the air was like the sea. The lightning whip carried a terrifying power and lashed out at Tian Chanzi and the Empyrean fairy. The 2 of them did not dare to be careless. They simultaneously took out their magic weapons. When Heaven Monk first obtained the Tai sword, he was in high spirits. Activating his innate chi, he used the flying immortal sword. Shwa, the Tai sword flew out, drawing a beautiful sword light, welcoming the lightning whip. Pung! The sword light and the lightning bolt collided and burst out a dazzling light. However, no one could do anything to the other. Tian Chanzi was not willing to give up. The ghost was even more unwilling. Both of them launched a second round of attacks at the same time. The Tai sword and the lightning whip occupied more than half of the sky, leaving behind countless shadows and lights. It was earth-shattering. Rumble! It was as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting. The ghost was multitasking. On one hand, it fought Tian Chanzi. On the other hand, it waved the lightning whip to attack the Empyrean fairy. The Empyrean fairy was calm. Although she knew that the opponent was strong, her heart was still as water. Step by step, she calmly received the attack. As soon as the stately painting appeared, a gust of wind blew from it, forming a small tornado. It was like a whip entangled with the lightning whip. They fought like a tug-of-war. The ghost did not panic at all. It also dealt with the attacks as they came. A black gas surged out of its body and entered the tornado. Suddenly, the tornado turned black. A few ghost heads flashed faintly inside. Boom! With an explosion, the tornado was torn apart. The ghost heads proudly floated up, as if mocking the Empyrean fairy. The Empyrean fairy coldly snorted. "You're courting death!" With a thought, a huge whirlpool appeared on the stately painting. The suction force increased, and the air was immediately sucked into the painting. Chapter 956. Several ferocious ghost heads flew towards the stately painting. However, the gigantic ghost roared and emitted clouds of black gas, which immediately engulfed the ghost heads. Immediately, the ghost heads seemed to have found their home and quickly merged with the black gas, returning to the ghost's body. Although the stately painting was very attractive, it was unable to shake this ferocious ghost. The flames in the ghost's eyes danced, as if mocking the Empyrean fairy's helplessness. The Empyrean fairy's brows trembled. "I don't believe I can't deal with you." As soon as she finished speaking, a towering mountain fell from the sky, pressing down on the ghost's body. The monster roared angrily and used its body to block the mountain. Compared to the mountain, it was much smaller. The stairs created by the black clouds under its feet cracked, and many cracks spread out. The mountain's enormous strength bent its waist. Tian Chanzi acted according to the situation and slashed out with the Tia sword, directly piercing a large hole in the ghost's chest. Countless clouds of black gas flew into the sky, turning into ferocious ghost heads. Bang! The ghost knelt on the ground, and the stairs fell apart. The ghost directly fell towards the Tree of Life. "Be careful of the Tree of Life!" Tang Jing cried out in alarm. Seeing that the ghost was about to land on the Tree of Life, the Empyrean fairy immediately withdrew the towering mountain, afraid that it would destroy the Tree of Life. The ghost broke free and waved its large hand, lashing out at Tian Chanzi and the Empyrean fairy with its lightning whip. The two glanced at each other, deep helplessness in their eyes. They couldn't completely kill this ghost, and below them was the Tree of Life. In order to protect it, their battle strength was greatly restricted, and they couldn't use their fists and feet. "What do we do?" The two dodged the lightning whip and asked each other. However, there was a hint of helplessness in their eyes. This ghost's battle strength wasn't very high, but the key was that it was formed from ghosts, which was equivalent to an immortal body. This made them feel helpless. Tang Jing couldn't do anything, but seeing their reactions, he knew how difficult this opponent was. Suddenly, he had an idea. "I have an idea, but I don't know if it'll work." "What is it?" "Hurry up and tell us." The two of them were impatient. "Beat him into a state of disintegration again, and then I'll use the sky-swallowing technique to absorb those ghosts," Tang Jing said. The Empyrean fairy subconsciously frowned and said, "This ghost is very strange. Even my stately painting can't do anything to it." In other words, could Tang Ding's sky-swallowing technique really absorb those ghosts? "We can give it a try." Tang Jing was ready to take another gamble. The two of them rolled their eyes helplessly. This brat's sky-swallowing technique was too strange. Perhaps it really could work. "All right, then we'll be in charge of beating him into pieces. You'll be in charge of using the sky-swallowing technique to absorb the ghost." The Empyrean fairy pondered for a moment before deciding to take the risk. Tian Chanzi and Empyrean fairy immediately launched a ferocious attack. With one move after another, the lightning whip couldn't even touch their bodies. Bang bang! With two muffled sounds, two attacks landed on the ghost's body. The ghost was immediately torn into pieces, and even the lightning whip quickly disappeared. Suddenly, there were many ghost heads in the sky, but they quickly gathered together in an attempt to restore their original appearance. Tang Jing had been waiting for a long time. When he saw this scene, he immediately used the sky-swallowing technique. In an instant, another black hole appeared in front of him. The surrounding air was sucked into the black hole with a whoosh. The ghost heads seemed to feel threatened. They screamed malevolently and flew toward the black hole. Tang Jing was overjoyed. It seemed that it was effective. However, he was happy too early. Those ghost heads seemed to be bound by an invisible force and stopped in front of the black hole. No matter how Tang Jing used the sky-swallowing technique, he couldn't absorb them. "What's going on?" Tang Jing was shocked. "Hee, do you think it's so simple to gather the most sinister ghost power of the 9 underworlds? You want to absorb these ghosts? Dream on! These ghosts are controlled by the world of spirits and souls. No one else can absorb them." The ghost's head gradually took shape. It opened its mouth and snorted with laughter. Tang Jing shook his head. These ghosts had such a strong background. It seemed that the world of spirits and souls had really put in a lot of effort. The Empyrean maiden was also enlightened. Her painting of mountains and rivers of the gods of earth and veil could absorb many things, including living people and, of course, ordinary souls. She was still wondering why the mountain river map didn't work on these ghosts. It turned out that they came from the 9 underworlds. It was said that there was a mysterious place in the world of spirits and souls, the 9 underworlds. This was the most sinister and terrifying place in the world of spirits and souls. Even the world of spirits and souls were very afraid of it. The 9 underworlds would devour ordinary ghosts. These ghosts would be infected with endless ferocity in the 9 underworlds and lose their nature. Even the people in the world of spirits and souls would stay away from it. This time, the world of spirits and souls actually gathered the ghosts of the 9 underworlds to create such a ghost to deal with the Tree of Life. In fact, this was also a helpless move by the world of spirits and souls. The only thing that could deal with the Tree of Life was the 9 underworlds lightning, which was the black lightning from before. The only thing that could release this lightning was the ghosts of the 9 underworlds. This was the result of the world of spirits and souls putting in a lot of effort. Then, they couldn't wait to use it here. Unfortunately, they were stopped by Tang Jing and the others. After hearing the words of the ghost, their faces changed a lot. They were unusually dignified. They looked at each other and couldn't hide the disappointment in each other's eyes. Seeing the ghosts condense together again, Tang Jing unwillingly roared and said, "I don't believe in this evil. No one can hurt the Tree of Life." He activated the sky-swallowing technique like a madman. At the same time, a mighty vital chi rushed out of his yuanying and poured into his 8 extraordinary meridians. Even the 5-clawed golden dragon in the dragon seal let out a dragon roar. A burst of golden light burst out from his forehead and enveloped his whole body. Bathed in the golden light, his body seemed to have grown dragon scales, reflecting the sun in the sky. He was mighty and extraordinary. Suddenly, the black hole changed. A stream of air swirled rapidly in the black hole. After a while, it turned into a vortex, and the vortex became bigger and bigger. "What's going on?" the ghost exclaimed and looked at the scene in front of him in disbelief. This was because he found that his ghost showed signs of being pulled out. Tang Dang's eyes lit up. He also found a clue. His face gradually bloomed with joy. He laughed wildly and said, "I'll let you have a taste of the sky-swallowing technique, soul-devouring." Under his desperate urging, the sky-swallowing technique broke through to the 3rd level, soul-devouring. Recently, his cultivation had increased a lot, and he had never slacked on the cultivation of the sky-swallowing technique. All of this was like water flowing naturally. He just needed an opportunity. This opportunity finally came. He quickly broke through to the 3rd level, soul-devouring. The so-called soul-devouring, as the name suggested, was to devour souls. This ghost was condensed from ghosts, and did not have a physical body at all. It was completely a soul. Therefore, the sky-swallowing technique was just right to deal with it. Even if it was a ghost from the netherworld, it would be difficult for it to escape the attack of the sky-swallowing technique. The ghost's cheeks twisted and became more and more ferocious. The 2 flames in its eyes stared at Tang Jing and said, "I'm going to kill you!" A bolt of netherworld lightning appeared in its palm. With a shake of its wrist, it whipped toward Tang Jing. "Do you think I'm afraid of your lightning?" Tang Jing snorted disdainfully. The suction of the black hole increased greatly. Even the air was sucked into the black hole. Chapter 957. Tang Jing focused his mind and the black hole disappeared. However, the black vortex in the sky was still there, like a huge eyeball, staring at the 3 of them. The 3 of them stood side by side. Tian Chanzi carefully looked at Tang Jing and praised, "Tang Jing, you're really good at hiding things. When this is over, you have to tell me about the sky-swallowing technique. In my impression, the sky-swallowing technique is not like this. Tang Jing modestly smiled and nodded his head in agreement. The Empyrean fairy also looked at his hand and said, "With this sky-swallowing technique, the ghost realm won't be able to use this method again." Tian Chanzi nodded in agreement. "Yes, as long as there is no such thing, the other people from the ghost realm may not be our opponent." He rubbed his hands together, full of confidence. "That black vortex is connected to the ghost realm, but we can't let it stay suspended above the tree of life. If we don't get rid of this hidden danger, we can't be at ease," Tang Jing said worriedly. "Then let's check out the real situation of this vortex," the Empyrean fairy said in a low voice. She jumped and flew toward the vortex. A strong yin-chi spread out from the vortex and shrouded her. If an ordinary person was shrouded in such a strong yin-chi, they would definitely have hallucinations, with hundreds of ghosts surrounding them and gloomy winds howling. But for her, it didn't affect her at all. She slammed her palm into the whirlpool, and a powerful force surged up and rushed into the whirlpool. Rumble! A loud noise came from the vortex. The vortex spun rapidly and shrank inwards, becoming smaller and smaller, as if it was frightened by the palm. But the three of them didn't think so. Their judgment was immediately realized. Suddenly, a ghostly claw reached out from the rapidly shrinking vortex. It was only made of white bones and no flesh. It was eerie and terrifying. It descended from the sky and grabbed at the Empyrean fairy. The Empyrean fairy's face was solemn. She didn't dare to be careless. She struck out 3 more times in the air, hitting the ghost claw one after another. Loud sounds rang out continuously. The ghost claw glowed with white light and broke a few of its fingers. It quickly retreated back into the whirlpool. Tang Jing and Tian Chanzi hurriedly came forward and said, "Why don't we rush in? At most, we'll just wreak havoc in the ghost realm. Anyway, it's not like I haven't done it before." Breaking into the ghost realm? The Empyrean fairy and Tian Chanzi looked at him at the same time and exclaimed, "Why can't I? Do you think the ghost realm is a public toilet where you can come and go as you please?" Tian Chanzi asked back. Tang Jing was stunned for a moment. The fact that he went to the ghost realm to save people was not announced to the public. Only Yi Xuanji and Yi Tianlei knew about it. Even Tian Chanzi didn't know. Seeing him so surprised, Tang Jing whispered, "Actually, I've been to the ghost realm a long time ago." "What?" Tian Chanzi exclaimed. The Empyrean fairy's eyebrows also trembled a few times. She looked at him as if he was a monster. Tang Jing smiled bitterly. "Is there a need to be so surprised? You're not joking?" Tian Chanzi stared at him and asked seriously, "Do I look like I'm joking?" "Not at all." Tian Chanzi and Empyrean fairy both knew that Tang Jing wasn't a person who liked to play pranks. Then, what he said was true. "When did it happen?" Tian Chanzi asked. "A few months ago." "A few months ago? At that time, how high was your cultivation? You actually broke into the ghost realm. You don't want to live anymore?" Tian Chanzi growled. He was very anxious and full of concern. "It's really not as dangerous as you think. The ignorant are fearless. The ghost realm is not as simple as you think. Because of the special nature of the ghost realm's yin-chi is very strong. Ordinary people will die immediately if they go in. Even if the strong cultivators go in, they will be eroded by the yin-chi. It won't be long before they die," Tian Chanzi said. Tang Jing couldn't help but recall the scene at that time. The yin-chi did erode his body, but he had the 9 young saint body. The yin-chi couldn't do anything to him. Other people's bodies weren't as lucky as him. Empyrean fairy was silent the whole time. She only stared at him without blinking. Finally, she opened her mouth and said, "I understand. He can safely enter and exit the ghost realm because he has the 9 young saint body. He doesn't fear the yin-chi." Tian Chanzi was stunned for a moment. He suddenly slapped his head and said, "That's right. How could I forget this? You have the 9 yang saint body. We can't compare to you. Tang Jing smiled and said, Your cultivation is so high. You should be able to, right? Do you think everyone is as abnormal as you? In any case, I can't do it. As for Empyrean Fairy, I don't know. Tian Chanzi shook his head. He was ashamed of his inferiority. I can't do it either, Empyrean Fairy said in an earth-shattering voice. Really? You are in the demigod realm. Moreover, you have the 9 yang saint body. Tang Zheng was shocked. Empyrean Fairy lightly said, It is because I have the 9 yang saint body that I can't go to the ghost realm. The yin qi in the ghost realm is very strong. It will explode the pure yin qi in my body. When that happens, I will die without a doubt. Is that so? Tang Jing suddenly realized. He couldn't help but fall into deep thought. It seemed that he had overlooked a problem. That was, the Empyrean Fairy had the 9 yang saint body. Could it be that the 9 yang saint body didn't have the danger of exploding? He unconsciously stared at the Empyrean Fairy as if he wanted to study her thoroughly. It's very different from ordinary ghosts. That's why it can move freely under the sun. But after all, it's only a minority. Empyrean Fairy added. Tang Jing pondered for a moment and asked, Will they just watch us absorb the original energy of the ghost realm? Of course not, they'll definitely think of another way. If that's the case, then it's necessary to go to the ghost realm. I won't be at ease if I don't thoroughly understand their next move. Tang Jing pondered for a moment, and made this decision. Tian Chanzi opened his eyes wide and scolded. Brat, do you really think your life is too long? Although you went to the ghost realm and came out unscathed, that was then and this is now. Now the ghost realm must be facing a great enemy. They won't let go of any movement. If your identity is discovered, who's going to save you? Tang Jing didn't back down and said, But we can't just sit and wait for death. It's not my style to sit and wait for the enemy to attack. You! Tian Chanzi was so angry that his beard blew and his eyes widened, but he couldn't do anything. Do you really want to go to the ghost realm? Empyrean Fairy asked. Tang Zheng nodded. If there's no other way, I don't mind taking the risk. The tree of life is related to the survival of the human world. If we're careless and give the ghost realm a chance to destroy the tree of life, then it'll be too late for regrets. I don't think there's a chance to find a second tree of life. You're very smart, and even braver. Empyrean Fairy praised. It wasn't easy to get a word of praise from her. Tang Jing was happy, and the corner of his mouth hooked up into a smile. You're flattering me. But it's very likely that you'll die this time. Tang Jing's smile faded, and faces flashed through his mind. There were relatives, lovers, and friends. If this world was destroyed, then they wouldn't exist anymore. So, he didn't do all this for any lofty ideals, but to let the people around him live a good life. This was enough to support him to make this decision. I know. If I say that I'm not afraid at all, then I'd be lying. But in life, sometimes we have to know that there are tigers in the mountain, but we have to go to the tiger mountain. Tang Zheng's expression was resolute. Empyrean Fairy was in awe, and praised. Good. Chapter 958. The Sentence. Knowing that there are tigers in the mountain, won the praise of the mysterious maiden of the 9th heaven. Heaven Monk swallowed the words of dissuasion that were about to come out of his mouth and faintly sighed. I'll go down and check on them. Tang Jing flew down from the tree of life and found Wu Junshan supporting Wu Junshan, anxiously looking up. How is it? Seeing him come down, the two hurriedly asked. It's fine. The enemy has temporarily retreated. You don't need to worry. That's good. Are you okay? Tang Jing looked at the weak Wu Junshan and hesitated for a moment before asking. I'm fine. Wu Junshan quickly raised his voice and stood up straight, as if to prove that he was fine. However, this movement caused him to cough violently and fall to the side. Careful! Tang Jing cried out in alarm, but his eyes were sharp, and his hands were quick, as he supported him. Wu Junshan was supported by his son, and finally stood firm. His eyes were filled with gratification as he said, "I'm really old and useless. Don't speak. Let me check your injuries." Tang Jing noticed that the other party's condition wasn't so good. His vitality was very weak and obvious. Granny Li's previous attack couldn't be underestimated. "I'm fine." Wu Junshan still wanted to show off, but Tang Jing's hands held him down and he couldn't move. In the end, he gave in and his eyes became much softer. He used to be the master of a sect with a high status. His words carried enormous weight, and he was unparalleled in dominance. When had he ever been so soft? But in front of his son, all sorts of feelings welled up in his heart. Tang Jing calmed down and carefully checked his injuries, only to find that many of his meridians had been broken. This wasn't a light injury but a serious one. If he didn't receive treatment, he might even die. "You call this fine?" Tang Jing asked solemnly. "I'm really fine. Who knows how many injuries I've suffered over the years, but I've endured them all," Wu Junshan said indifferently. He naturally knew the severity of his injuries, but in front of his son, he didn't want to show his weak side. Back then, he was weak and couldn't protect Tang Jing. Because of this, he felt guilty for most of his life. He did not want his son to see his weak side again. "Tang Jing, is Master's injury really that serious? Is there a way?" When Wu heard this, his expression tensed up as he asked anxiously. "His injuries are very serious. There must be a way. Then you should quickly treat Master's injuries. Nothing can happen to him," the Empyrean fairy said. Tang Jing nodded. Just as he was about to heal him, he noticed a figure approaching from afar. In the blink of an eye, the figure arrived in front of him. It was Lan Yu. Tang Jing shivered. He remembered that she was chasing after Granny Li, so he quickly asked, "Did you catch up with Granny Li?" Lan Yu was somewhat dejected and said, "That old woman is too cunning. She actually slipped away when we weren't paying attention. By the time I caught up with her, she had already escaped far away. I chased after her for a long distance, but in the end, I couldn't find any trace of her, so I returned." She had always been worried about her son's safety. Seeing that she could not find Granny Li, she hurried back to see if her son needed any help. When she saw her son supporting her husband, her heart skipped a beat as she hurriedly asked, "What's wrong?" "He is seriously injured. I will treat him," Tang Jing calmly said. Lan Yu's heart tightened as she asked, "Is it serious?" Tang Jing nodded. Seeing her nervous expression, he comforted her. "Don't worry, I have a way." Saying this, he took out a pill. 9 Transformation Soul Return Pill. It had the miraculous effect of reviving the dead. Wu knew the value of this pill and subconsciously called out. Wu Junshan blankly asked, "Is this pill very precious?" Wu hurriedly introduced the 9 Transformation Soul Return Pill. Wu Junshan firmly shook his head. "No, how can such a precious pill be given to me? Little Jing, keep it by your side in case you need it in the future. This injury won't take my life." Lan Yu wanted to say something but hesitated. She was both concerned about her son and her husband. For a moment she did not know how to choose. In the end, she chose to stand by her husband's side. She gently advised, "Little Jing, this pill is so precious. You should keep it for yourself." Tang Jing could feel a deep sense of concern. He would rather sacrifice himself for his own good. Although he used to hate his parents, ever since he came into contact with them, he felt their meticulous care for him. The ice in his heart had gradually melted by a lot. At this moment, his heart was even warmer. But he did not act like a little girl. Instead, he fed it into Wu Junshan's mouth and said, "You still want to show off at a time of life and death. Swallow it." The 9 Transformation Soul Return Pill melted in his mouth. Before Wu Junshan could react, the pill turned into a warm current that flowed down his throat. But what was even warmer than the pill was his heart. Tang Jing's actions completely melted Wu Junshan's heart. The corner of his eyes blinked, and he could not help but have a sparkling color. Tang Jing saw through his mood and warned, "Focus and calm down. Feel the medicinal properties of the 9 transformation soul return pill." Wu Junshan nodded heavily. He calmed his mind and quietly felt the medicinal properties. Everywhere the pill's warm current passed, it was like a withered tree in spring. His damaged meridians quickly healed and his body quickly returned to its peak condition. It was even better than before he was injured. His inner strength surged like the sound of a huge bell reverberating in his body. A ray of light burst out from his eyes as he faced the sky and let out a long roar. The turbid chi in his heart was all expelled with this roar. His dispirited state was swept away and his spirit was refreshed. Lan Yu's eyelids suddenly jumped as she cried out in alarm. Martial King Realm, he actually broke through. Broken and then rebuilt. Wu Junshan's body was on the brink of exhaustion. But when the 9 transformation soul return pill's vitality entered his body, the withered tree was immediately rejuvenated. He immediately broke through the shackles of his cultivation and stepped onto a new level. The roar stopped, and he looked at Tang Jing with a radiant face. He felt the mysterious feeling of the martial king realm and sincerely said, "Little Jing, thank you." Lan Yu excitedly grabbed her son's hand. Her face blossomed with motherly radiance as she emotionally said, "Little Jing, we never took good care of you. But you disregarded the past and saved him. I really don't know what to say." Tang Jing's expression was calm as he said, "It's just a small matter. Also, I have something to tell you." "What is it?" Seeing him so serious, the others curiously asked. "I want to go to the ghost realm." "Go to the ghost realm? Is it dangerous?" the 3 asked in unison. Obviously, in their hearts, Tang Jing's safety was the most important. Tang Jing's head flowed with warmth as he calmly said, "There won't be any danger." "Then we'll go with you." Wu Junshan volunteered without any explanation. Tang Jing shook his head. "You can't go. The ghost realm is not like other places. It's not good for your body to go. Only I can go." "Then what about Tian Chanzi and Empyrean Fairy? Their cultivations are so high, so they can definitely accompany you. At least you can look after each other," Lan Yu replied. "They can't go either. I'm the only one who can go." "Why?" Hearing this, the 3 were shocked. They realized that the situation was far more serious than they thought. Tang Jing did not want to lie to them. This trip was dangerous and unpredictable. If something unexpected happened, he did not want to tell them lies in the end. Yin Qi has a corrosive effect on the human body. After a long time, people will die. But I have the 9 Yang Saint body, so I can withstand the corrosive effects of Yin Qi. "What? No, this is too risky. How can you go alone to the ghost realm?" Lan Yu was the first to scream and stop him. Wu Junshan also nodded in agreement. "Although I'm not a cultivator and don't know much about the ghost realm, I can imagine the dangers of the ghost realm. If you go alone, wouldn't that be throwing yourself into a trap? No, you can't go." Wu Ji stared at Tang Jing without saying a word. She understood him the best. From his words and expression, she could tell that he had already made up his mind. But the worry in her heart did not allow her to do nothing. She tightly held onto Tang Jing's hand and begged, "Can you not go? It's too dangerous." Tang Jing gently looked at her and stroked her hair, saying, "Although there is danger, I have to go. Otherwise, if we don't know about the ghost realm's conspiracy, we won't have any countermeasures. Then we'll just be passively taking a beating. It's too dangerous." Wu Ji shook her head. Her eyes were moist as she said, "But—" Tang Jing interrupted her and said, "I know you're worried, but you've been with me for so long. You should know my abilities. I'm an unkillable cockroach. I won't die so easily. Pay. Lan Yu suddenly said loudly. "At this juncture, don't say such inauspicious things." She and her husband looked at each other. They both understood their son's determination. This stubborn character was like Wu Junshan. Once he made a decision, even 10 oxen would not be able to pull him back. But when they thought of the danger they were about to face, the couple's hearts could not help but clench. At this time, Tian Chanzi and Emperor Fairy also came down from the tree. Looking at the family's expression, they knew that Tang Jing had already told them his plan. Tian Chanzi could not help but advise again. Tang Jing, are you really not going to reconsider? I've already made up my mind. Tang Jing's answer was resolute and decisive. Don't try to persuade me. I won't change my mind. Before we leave, I'll arrange a mission for each of you. Tell me, Wu Junshan quickly said. Granny Li has already escaped, so Li Xiaotian is in danger. If Granny Li retakes the Li Palace, then it will be very difficult for us to find the new location of the Li Palace. Therefore, we must take advantage of this opportunity to completely sever the relationship between Granny Li and the Li Palace. Wu, you and Master's wife will return to the Li Palace. With your current strength, it will be more than enough to deal with Granny Li, Tang Jing methodically arranged. Granny Li was only a first-grade martial king, the same as Wu Junshan. Moreover, she was heavily injured, so she was not their match. Although Lan Yu was worried about Li Xiaotian in her heart, she still agreed. Fu Yao, you go home. The High Lord has already escaped. He is a ticking time bomb, who knows when it will explode. Now that he has no way to deal with me, I'm worried that he will deal with my family. With your cultivation, going back to protect your family should not be a problem. Fu Yao considered for a moment, then nodded in agreement. Seeing Tang Jing turn his head to look at him, Tian Chanzi asked with a smile. What kind of mission are you going to arrange for me? You stay behind to protect the Tree of Life. Once again activate the 8 Desolation Array to guard against possible attacks from the Ghost Realm, Tang Jing said solemnly. Although they had analyzed that the Ghost Realm would not rashly launch a large-scale attack, it was still better to be careful. Don't worry, with me here, the Ghost Realm won't be able to cause any trouble. Tian Chanzi patted his chest and promised. Tang Jing looked deeply at everyone and said, Then I can leave with peace of mind. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.